Are we doing it? Did it happen? Are we here? It says we're streaming. It says we're streaming. It says we're streaming. Where's my beautiful face? Where's my beautiful face? Dun 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 dun. Here we are. Good evening, dragon fruit. Yeah, here we are. We're gonna stream again. Yeah, here we are. We're doing yet another stream. Yeah, here we are. Boom, boom, boom. And nothing much has changed. Yeah, nothing much has changed. Yeah, nothing much has changed. It's same shit, different day, as they like to say. It's just straight up getting obvious. Getting obvious. That guy's late, but yeah. Good to see you guys. Good to see that guy. Good to see you, Gabriel, Gabriel. Whichever one of those you choose. That's great. Good to see you guys. I'm kind of in a goofy mood. I'm in a bit of a goofy mood because I've been on a bit of a vacation, and I feel like I've done not much but like chill out, play video games, sleep. Just having a real vacation. Just having a real vacation. Bex, how you doing? And so I'm kind of in a goofy mood, honestly. I'm in a goofy, kind of just silly sort of place. It's really hard to take a lot of all of this. It's so fucking stupid. Right? It's getting really, really dumb at this point. You're getting you do get some interesting statements that are getting made from Bree Newsom. If the only choice is fascism, apartheid, and genocide, I choose instead to revolt. Yeah. Thanks, Bree Newsom. Yeah, I think that's basically the bottom line on it, right? Who is actually going out to vote for any of this? Who's actually gonna 2024? Literally half of the democracies that exist on Earth are going to go out and vote. And it looks like for a large number of them, for a significant portion of the ones in the West, looks like they're swinging hard to the right. You literally have massive protests that just happened in Germany. Turmoil in Germany over neo-Nazi mass deportation meeting. Literally, you've got thousands of people on the streets in Germany because the sitting government had meetings with outright neo-Nazis, right? Over the past weeks, tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets of German cities to demonstrate against right-wing extremism. The protests were sparked by the revelation that the members of the far-right Alternative for Deutschland, AfD party, had attended a meeting with neo-Nazis and other extremists to discuss the mass deportation of migrants, asylum seekers, and German citizens of foreign origin deemed to have failed to integrate. The meeting took place in a hotel outside of East German city of Potsdam on the 25th of November, but didn't come to light until the 10th of January. A central focus was a presentation by Martin Sellner, the Australian leader of the ethno-nationalist identitarian movement, about the practicalities of carrying out mass deportation, referred to in far-right circles as remigration. Isn't that nice? Isn't it great that they've got this language, right? Remigration. Who are the main figures? On the various participants, the most popular is Sellner, who's considered a poster boy for young far-right extremists across Europe. The event was organized by a retired dentist called Gernot Morig, who once led the far-right Association of Homeland Faithful Youth, and Hans Christian Limmer, an entrepreneur and investor. Limmer has rejected the suggestion. He supports the proposals, even though he's funding it. Mario Molnar, a member of the identitarian movement known for his international connections with the far-right campaigners and an advertiser to an IFD MP, is reported to have spoken at the event. On leading IFD members whose attendance was confirmed was Roland Hartwig, an advisor, since dismissed, to the party's co-leader and parliamentary chief, Alice Weidel, Tim Kraus, the party's district chair in Potsdam, and Ulrich Sigmund, the joint parliamentary chair in the state of Saxony-Anhalt. So straight up, just like elected officials, let's go have a meeting with Nazis about how to deport people. This is a normal thing that should definitely be happening in Germany, right? The upswell of it, the uptick of it, is that the response from the public has actually been quite serious. That the German people are not taking this news with a like, oh, that's a normal thing. Oh, I guess that's just politics as usual. That the people of Germany seem to be very much opposed to this idea that anybody be organizing on Nazi principles. Which, you know, that's good to hear, because the scariest part about all of this is, in fact, that it looks like the Nazis are returning to their roots, right? Oh, sorry, the Germans are returning to their roots, right? That that Nazism was never actually, like, Nazism itself was never actually defeated in Germany, right? That Nazism went through a rehabilitation period, and you can see that in the history with NATO, right? You can see that NATO worked really hard to rehabilitate Nazis and Nazism, right? And so it's and so the idea that the Nazis will return to power in Germany, well, that's got to be something that the Germans themselves have got to be concerned about, right? Well, here they are, right? Being pretty flagrant, pretty open. And the question is, will these people continue to remain in power? Will they continue to gain in power? And I mean, it looks to me that as far as American politics are concerned, right, we're going to continue just acting like big giant fascists in the world. Yeah, that's what you get from integrating literally the original Nazis into the institutions of Europe. Yeah. But wait, you mean if you take Nazis and integrate them into your systems, you end up with Nazi systems? What? Like, we've got Biden admitting the airstrikes on the Houthis are not working, but just that he says that they'll continue. Azron, good to see you, my friend. My CC radar pinged. I don't know what that means, but okay. Like, imagine straight up admitting we're doing airstrikes on the Houthis, they're not working, but we're going to do it anyway. The Captain on Twitch, good to see you. Much love to you as well. Like, the American empire is out of ideas. It doesn't know what to do. It doesn't know how to respond or react to anything. It has no plans. It has no thoughts. It has no ideas. The only thoughts and ideas that it has left are, we've got this big giant military, we might as well use it. And they know that it's not working, but they're doing it anyway. Why? Because they're demented. They're run by a demented old man. The leader of the opposition is another demented old man. And the generals that are running the military are demented old men who have no idea what's actually going on, nor do they seem to care about what's going on. So, like, we're watching this enormous decline of the West happening in swift and significant ways. Here in Canada, this is a tweet that I actually thought was really interesting that came from Pierre Poilievre. This tweet I thought was actually really interesting. So, incoming Liberal leader Mark Carney told the WEF that central bankers did a great job over the last few years. He's right. They did a great job making people like him fabulously wealthy by inflating the assets of the super rich while robbing the buying power of workers' paychecks and senior savings. I will end money printing and axe the inflation tax to protect the power of paychecks and pensions. This is the first time that I have ever seen any conservative anywhere at any time actually discuss the concept of the super rich in a negative way. Like that's the reason why this tweet is so interesting. I gotta believe that this is sort of just slipping through. Like, I gotta believe that, like, this is we accidentally told the truth moment. That he's saying inflating the assets of the super rich. Well, why is that bad? Isn't that the whole point? Isn't the whole point of the economy to inflate the assets of the super rich? That at any time I have said that we should tax the rich, or we should remove the power of the rich, or we should do something, I've been told I want to destroy the economy, right? Well, now here's the leader of the opposition in Canada saying that he wants to do that. What is he destroying the economy? All of a sudden, all of the stuff that I've been saying this entire time is like conservative common sense. That's the thing that's so kind of shocking to see. And it's interesting because you get talking to conservative types, and there's obviously this contradiction now that exists, that obviously things have gotten so bad that they can no longer deny the existence of the things going bad. Like, it's only like the most demented people that are still saying get a job, right? It's only the most demented people who like, so there's this small fringe, the Nazis essentially, and people who are just like out of their mind completely and detached from reality completely, who are still saying that, like, no, you just need to work harder. Just get a better job, right? And all of the stuff that we've been saying, or that I've been saying over the last 10 years, now all of a sudden you're seeing Pierre Poilievre talk about it. Now all of a sudden you're starting to see, like, oh, wait a minute. All of these problems that actually exist and are real and are obvious in front of us, like, you can see them, they're directly in front of you. They have solutions, right? But they can't actually openly discuss what those solutions are, because all of the solutions have been the thing that the communists have been saying the whole time. That's the best part, is that at the end of the day, the people on the right seem to just be going, well, okay, these are actually problems. These are real, actual problems. We can no longer ignore them because they're affecting us. We could ignore them before and play the blame game because they were affecting minorities and people we didn't care about. But now they're affecting us. So we got to do something about this problem that's now affecting us, that everybody was talking about for 40 years, but it was affecting minorities and people we don't give a shit about. But now it's affecting us. So this is a real problem now that it's affecting us. How do we solve this problem now that it's affecting us? Well, the solutions are the things that the communists have been saying for the last 40 years. I mean, that seems, I guess that, yeah, right? Generationally propagandized lumpen proletariat. I mean, like, because at the end of the day, right, the collapses that are coming, and the collapses that are already, like, we're watching them happen in real time, right? They're not going to be ignorable. We're not just going to be able to be like, just get a better job. The people who say that will just be like, just laugh at them. I do. Like, I laugh in those people's faces. I think that they're dumb. It's a stupid thing to say, right? Like just telling a person who's drowning to breathe air. Oh, okay, buddy. Like, thanks for the hot tip, right? Thanks, buddy. Just the most brain dead, detached dumb fuckery I've ever seen. People who should not be opening their mouths and being part of the conversation. But, everybody's got free speech, so I guess free speech means saying the most dumb fuck things you've ever heard, and that just being like a normal thing. My freedom of speech means I get to dismiss somebody's entire existence based on the assumption that they're not looking for a better job, and my assumption that those better jobs definitely exist 100%. My assumption that the wealthy are actually hiring. Yep, because I've subserviated myself to the concept of capitalist realism, and that capitalism is the end of history, and if it fails, well then, what? Like, that's going to be the best part, is all of these people who have subserviated themselves to the concept that capitalist realism exists, that this is the end of history, that there is nothing, there is no further evolution of human society, that we can't possibly move forward from all of this kind of stuff. Well, when the system of capital begins to, like Like it's in retrograde right now. It's degrading now, but it's going to collapse. Like we're going to see a financial collapse. We're going to see a massive mass layoffs. That's going to make the layoffs that are happening right now look like baby time, right? Rents are skyrocketing already. They're going to keep skyrocketing. Housing prices are skyrocketing already. They're going to keep skyrocketing. Like the system is going to collapse in big and massive ways. And and these guys that have basically banked their entire ideological understanding of what's going on in the world on the concept that capitalism is good, actually, are going to be left with their dicks in their hands. And just, we're going to look at them and be like, so you're a bunch of fucking morons, right? Like, you guys are the stupidest people who maybe have ever existed, right? Is there a dumber group of people than people who actually believe that the system of capital is like the end all be all after it collapses, right? Like and that's exactly what we're going to be faced with. We're going to be faced with these guys who have been trying, like these Petersons and these Shapiros and these loser Republicans and these losers who keep trying to tell us that capitalism is the best system and all this kind of stuff. Well, once you have like we're already looking at a massive drug crisis. We're already looking at a massive homelessness crisis. We're already looking at a massive prison crisis. And it's all just going to get worse, massively worse, very quickly, like over the course of a couple of years. It's going to unravel very swiftly, because all of this wealth is just going to get sucked and sucked and sucked and sucked, and there's no redistribution method outside of get a job, but the wealthy aren't hiring. Right? Like they only need so many pilots to Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island, right? There's only so many people that you can hire to maintain your pedophile empire, right? There's only so many people who there's only so many servants that you need to have at your fucking child orgy, right? Like there's only so much of that you can have before everybody else is just sort of abandoned out in the Midwest and told, go fuck yourself. And it seems to me like the job work program is basically hire as many cops as possible and beat up the victims of the system of capital. That seems to be the solution. And it's just like, I don't think people are going to stand for it. I don't think people are going to put up with it. And so it's just very interesting to see that things have gotten so bad for the system of capital that even the leader of the Conservative Party at this point is willing to actually point out, hey, the assets of the super rich went through the roof, while robbing the buying power of the workers. Right? Sounds like a fucking communist. Right? Now we all know what's going to happen. Pierre's going to get into power. He's going to betray everybody. Right? Because that's good politics. That's good for him. Right? He's gonna make sure that the super rich are completely fine, and he's gonna make sure that the poor are completely demonized and shunted out of the system, because that's the way it actually works. But in terms of his rhetoric, like, this is how bad it's getting. That even they need to start using this rhetoric that used to be just like, if he had said this 10 years ago, he would not be the leader of this party. Straight up, he would not be the leader of this party. He might not even have a seat as an MP if he was talking this way, right? But now it's unavoidable. Like, now I don't think you can be a credible voice you can't be a credible voice in the world today while pretending as though the system of capital is working. Like, what are you even talking about? And it's just going to get so obvious for everyone. And of course, speaking of obvious, Elon Musk goes with Ben Shapiro, the Zionist pro-genocide advocate. He goes and visits Auschwitz, and he says the indoctrination of hate into kids in Gaza needs to stop. When I was in Israel, I understand the need for the invasion of Gaza. If toddlers are taught that they must kill Jews, they will believe it. It has to stop. So, the classic inversion of reality, right? That when you are a detached billionaire, right, you don't need to acknowledge the existence of reality. You don't need to pay any attention to what's real. You don't need to pay attention to facts or evidence, right? You can just manufacture whatever reality you want and nobody can tell you otherwise. Yeah, XD. Capitalism is working. Then why are we living in the desertified ruins of a city? That's communism's doing. Yeah, exactly. Compton, good to see you, my man. Good to see you. Like, that's part of this sort of dementia, frankly. That like the outcomes of capitalism are communism. It's wild to watch this kind of demented, uh, um, this kind of dementia take hold. This like zeitgeist dementia of just like let the lunatics take over, just let everything become baby babble and ridiculousness. Like I saw something recently where people were trying to write an article about like, oh wow, look at this weird rant that Trump went on, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, fucking Genocide Joe is doing all kinds of weird babble all the time. Like, it's a system run by demented losers, and we're just told, yeah, this is normal. It's completely normal that demented losers who do not give a shit about you at all should be in charge of the nuclear stockpile. Like, what convinces you that this is a successful system that's actually working? And the rest of the world has seen through it already. Like the rest of the world is seeing through it already. Like the abandonment of North America is going to be really fierce. Yeah, my demented genocidal old man is superior to your genocidal old man. Yeah, exactly. I saw this one the other day, and it really like made me pause for a minute. Made me recognize like, yeah, how come we're able to feed 60 billion farm animals, but feeding 8 billion people is considered a utopian dream? Interesting, right? Like, oh yeah, good point. There's 60 billion farm animals that we house and feed and take care of, right? But like 8 billion people, too much. Can't be done. Nope. No, nothing successful there. Can't happen. It's one of those moments. It's like one of these memes that popped up that made me really go like, oh yeah, like the propaganda system is completely full of shit. Like it's not capable of even addressing the issues in the most in any way that can be described as serious, right? Like it's I'm just constantly taken aback at how dedicated to the destruction of the society people seem to be, and how any solution is painted as bad because it'll lead to a negative outcome, as if a person sleeping on the street isn't already itself the worst outcome. Like, yeah, if you give people a place to live, then they'll not have a sense of purpose. Who cares? I cannot imagine a person taking this seriously. I cannot imagine this dumb, detached, conservative brain rot nonsense where a person is actually trying to convince themselves and people around them that giving people places to live is bad because it'll, quote unquote, remove their sense of purpose. These are arguments that people are trying to convince us are smart. They're trying to convince us that this is an intelligent worldview that's actually not simply poverty porn, just jerking off to other people's suffering, right? Which is actually what's happening at the end of the day. That the people who are arguing against actually housing and sheltering people, or who are pretending as though there's no solutions, or are pretending as though somehow these solutions are not going to work, or any of this kind of stuff, they're just jerking off to people's suffering. And that's like that's become the hard truth as far as I'm concerned. Like, if you're actually going to try to argue in front of me that people should not just have food and shelter, then I just assume you're getting off to their suffering. And there's no other position that makes any goddamn sense. Like, all of this like whinging and whining and complaining and foot shuffling and being like, well, there's got to be negative outcomes to providing people food and shelter. All of this attempting to find a problem with the idea of giving people food and shelter. It's just because to you it's pornography. Because when you go home you get to jerk off to their suffering. right? It's like the type of people who watch like bondage porn and really love it when the girl is in pain, right? Like that's the kind of shit that we're dealing with here. That people have a psychological need to watch other people suffer, and that's what's actually happening. The position that doesn't want to alleviate suffering is the position that wants to force people into church. Like, I mean, it's this. I also take a look at it from a like this whole like just get a job idea, that the only way that a person is allowed to have access to food and shelter is if they prove their value to owners. That's that's like a real capitalist realism mindset, right? This mindset of just like, and when a politician stands up, he doesn't say we're going to make sure people have food and shelter. He says we're going to get good jobs, right? So everything is through this litmus of you have to sell yourself to capitalists, and if you don't sell yourself to capitalists, then you don't have value, and you're not allowed to live. You're not allowed to have food, and you're not allowed to have shelter because you're not working a job for a capitalist. That's the system of thought that exists. Grinning writes, I'm not joking, that's the logic. Suffering forces people to God, and then God helps them with their problems. Yeah, but it's like it's just so masturbatorial, right? It's just a way to get off on other people's suffering at the end of the day, right? Don't solve people's problems, right? Give people a system by which they can deal with the problems that you refuse to solve. Like, that to me is what the whole like mindfulness and the whole like personal meditation and all this kind of stuff, like the individualization of spirituality, the disconnection of spirituality from the community, all of this shit that they're trying to sell on us. Like, it's not about resolving any of these problems or confronting any of these problems in a serious way. It's just telling you, it's essentially just saying deal with it. That's all it is. It's just saying to people, sure, things have gone to shit. We acknowledge that things have gone to shit. Just deal with it. That's fundamentally what they're saying. When what we need to do is come together as a people and surround the halls of power and be rid of all of this. Be rid of these systems that were erected by slavers and monarchs. Be rid of these ideas that we should somehow need to justify our existences to a pedophile death cult. Be gone with all of this nonsense that says the people who are at the top are there because they're competent, when it's obviously a farce, right? And the only thing that we should actually be doing is gathering en masse, surrounding the halls of power with signs that say goodbye, time to revolution, farewell. And when they start to draw up legislation that capitulates power to us, we should say, great, where's the means of production? Where's the means of production? We're no longer interested in you guys being part of this conversation. You understand what a revolution is, right? You understand what that means? It means that you are no longer part of the conversation, right? Like that to me was the big failing of the New Deal. That the failing of the communists and the trade unionists and the socialists is that when FDR drew up the New Deal and when he began to make concessions, they took those concessions. They didn't say, but wait a minute, why do the Rockefellers still have controlling interests in any organization anywhere? Why does any of these capitalists still own any property or assets or anything? Why is it that the workers are not, why is it not enshrined? Like, you guys literally drew up legislation and changed our constitution to take away alcohol, and then turned around and changed it again so that we could all get alcohol back again. Right? You can put an amendment in the Constitution that says food and shelter must be guaranteed. You could do that, right? No, you're not going to do that? Oh, okay, interesting. Well, then why are we abiding by any of these rules? Like, who cares what you have to say? Like, what legitimacy does this system have? And the legitimacy of these Western systems and the Western model is being challenged right now at the ICJ. Right? That to me is going to be a big tell, right? Like, there's a big looming question mark that I think the entire world, including the West, is looking at, which is can the West actually recover from this? Can they actually like find their footing again? And can they actually move forward in a way that's actually going to be reasonable? Actually, is it even possible? Right? And I take a look at the ICJ as a big moment of like, okay, maybe they can. Maybe the West can recover some credibility. Maybe the West can begin the long process of actually saying to its own people, "Oh yeah, we're not going to abandon you. These are not policies of total abandonment. We're not just extracting wealth and abandoning it to give to Jeffrey Epstein. Like that's not what the system looks like." But if the ICJ basically stands up and says, "Nope, not a genocide," well, then what credibility does this entire what credibility exists? Yeah, you'll have a better life in the next life. That's the mantra of Judeo-Christian religion. Yeah, it's a death cult, right? Don't think about building anything in this life. Think about the next life, right? Like it's a death cult. I mean, some people view that idea of look at the next life as the way that I do, which is look to the life that's coming. Like, don't look at your children, right? Like, or your children's children. Don't think about what's going to happen in your life. Think about what's going to happen in your children's life, or your children's children's life, or your children's 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 life, right? Think about it that way. And that to me is like that is a very like pro-life position. That's a very like life-giving position of like, yeah, we need to think about what we're building for the next generation, for the next group of people for people who are not yet born even. That's what that should mean. But what it actually means is like one day we'll go to heaven and wear crowns, like fucking this weird kooky death cult. Mountain McHale, you can have alcohol taxed at 65%. Yeah, that's fine. Tax alcohol at 65%. That's fine. Like I'm not sold on the idea that alcohol is a net positive for us anyway. Dragon fruit. Have I heard about the ridiculous Ben Shapiro versus Destiny debate video? These so-called political influencers in our society today are such massive hacks. I mean, it would be like listening to a typewriter debate a like a Siri AI. That's what it would be like. Just like they're both kind of the same, right? That people mistake their acuity of language and the speed with which they speak with intelligence. They're both imperialists. I don't really think they have much to debate, frankly. Like I'm not interested in it. I'm not going to watch it. But like it's like my assumption is that they're basically going to get into identity politics. It's going to be the same old tired arguments. Neither side is going to be particularly convincing. And a typewriter versus a squeaky door. I like that better, Danarchist. Right? And so it's just like nonsense. Oh, McHale's pointing, it's a policy they know full well disproportionately hurts the poorest, most downtrodden people. I was thinking about it more from just like, we as a people should probably just stop drinking alcohol, right? Like, I'm not like a anti-alcohol advocate or anything like that, but you're definitely catching me in a real like, I'm not convinced that alcohol is good for us. Like, I'm not drinking alcohol right at the moment, right? I'm not really convinced that it's a good thing that we have in our society and that we promote, right? And so, but definitely any consumption tax, like any tax on any good, is going to disproportionately, like that's why something like the GST, right, or the HST, disproportionately affects the poor more than it affects the rich, right? That's the whole point. Has a new bookshelf on Twitch. Hey, would you react to something horrible? That's essentially what I do all the time. Has a new bookshelf. I'm not gonna click on that link. Has a new bookshelf, but you can get me to search it if you like. I've been having trouble with my sound recently, and I haven't found a solution to it, so I can't really play videos right at the moment, which really sucks. Just for whatever reason, my system just decided it wasn't going to acknowledge that my headphones exist anymore. and I just have not been able to find a solution to this. So I can't click on this link. It's I mean maybe ask me what am I searching on YouTube? What should I find on YouTube? And I'll like just take a quick look at it. Because like, yeah, we should drink less, but forcing people into treatment is known not to work. I mean, like, to me, like, it seems like alcohol is a form of self-medication, that like people drink alcohol because they're trying to forget their life. It's the latest live video from Atheist Republic's channel on YouTube. I mean, YouTube Atheist Republic. Like, my assumption, it is an assumption, straight up, that like modern atheism, especially Western modern atheism, comes from a real perspective that religion is fundamentalist, and that spirituality is fundamentalist, right?
Formally
Yeah,
established on
yeah, yeah,
January.
boom. And so it's like it's easy to be an atheist, right? It's easy to be an atheist in this position. I mean, I'm not gonna actually watch this on stream, just so you know. Like, but like, we're not just atheists. We are atheists who care. Already, I mean, Muslims mock capture of IDF soldier. Muslim tracks IDF soldier in London. Uh, uh, Arabs explain how Hamas ruined Gaza. Muslims attack Bill Maher's plan for Gaza. Muslim makes dumbest mistake while trying to attack Israel. Right? These guys are genocide apologists. Right? Like I don't go any deeper than this. I can just read their perspective. These guys are genocide apologists. That's all. Like they don't. All you have to do is just do what Americans do the best, which is just ignore the existence of history, right? Bread Bunny, good to see you. Like, Americans are really, really good at this. Americans are not well educated. They don't really receive a history of any event that actually happened after like the 1900s. We'll do like hours and hours and hours on like the Roman Empire, but we won't do like the basic history of what occurred, you know, in like what occurred in your own province, you know, 20 years ago. You know, like when I was growing up, they did not teach. At no point in any of my education did they teach me about the '60s scoop in my home province of Manitoba. Right, something that happened like 30 years ago, 30 years before. Like literally, the residential school systems that they put up in Manitoba only came to an end at the same year that The Lion King was in theater. Like, I have images of myself like watching The Lion King in theater and being like, yeah, it means no worries for the rest of your days. Yeah, and we're shutting down the residential schools while that's going on. And at no point did anybody in any of my education at any time actually talk about the '60s scoop, right? So we're very poorly educated. We obliterate enormous amounts of education. And it looks to me like here's a person, he's got 43.9K subscribers. He probably started as somebody who was like an atheist coming out of the atheist kind of organizations that, or not organizations, but atheist sort of zeitgeist that occurred especially during the new atheist movement. And it's pretty telling that most of the new like Sam Harris is a total fraud, like a complete and total hack. He's a genocide apologist the entire way down. And it's completely rooted in the fact that they just like don't acknowledge history. They just don't know anything about history, nor do they care. They've chosen a side, and that side is the state. Chris Hedges really pegged these guys. He said, yeah, they've just replaced like God as the icon of their religion with the state. And so they just look at the United States and they say, well, what do the United States think? Okay, well, that's what it is. And they treat that as if it's the gospel of God itself, right? And so it's I'm not surprised very much. And again, like, I think that if atheism was to actually confront, uh, uh, it doesn't take like moral superiority to take a look at a fundamentalist and go, that's kooky. It's not really a morally superior position, right? Like, it's okay. So the guy that thinks magic is real, right? Maybe not. But then, like, you just sort of abandon the whole project and then treat people who are actually attempting to read these texts as if they are not books of magic, and attempting to glean anything larger from them as the same as fundamentalists. It's just sort of a waste of time, right? When are we expecting a result from the International Court? We don't know. These things can take years, right? Because the cases get put forward, and then a lot of time and a lot of energy is put into internal discussion and internal debates and internal politics, right? Like, it takes a long, long time. And frankly, the International Court of Justice wants to make its decisions after the event is over, and after, like, the consequences of, they are well aware that standing up and making big declarations can actually have, like, pretty profound immediate impacts. Like, if they stand up and say, yep, that's a genocide that's happening right now, well, one imagines that that's going to inspire a lot of movement in the Arab world, and it's going to inspire a lot of people in the Arab world to action, right? Especially if it's done while the bombing is happening. So they're going to wait. Like, they're going to wait. They're not going to just do it. That said, here's an interesting article. Come on. I had it right in front of me, you guys. Oh yeah, here we go. From the CBC. Federal government's decision to invoke Emergencies Act against convoy protests was unreasonable. Court rules. What have I been saying this whole time? What have I been saying this whole entire time? Right? Like, you can dislike what that convoy stood for, right? You can dislike what the convoy was saying. You can dislike that. They are citizens. They have the right to protest. A federal judge says the Liberal government's use of the Emergencies Act in early 2022 to clear convoy protesters was unreasonable and infringed on protesters' charter rights. I conclude there was no national emergency justifying the invocation of the Emergencies Act, and the decision to do so was therefore unreasonable and ultra vires, Federal Court Justice Richard Mosley wrote in a Tuesday decision. Ultra vires is a Latin term used by courts to refer to actions beyond the scope of the law. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland told reporters at a cabinet retreat in Montreal that the government plans to appeal the decision. Yeah, a weird Nazi apologist appealing a decision of the court. Who could have guessed? The federal court case was brought by two national groups, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association and the Canadian Constitution Foundation, and two people whose bank accounts were frozen. They argued Ottawa did not meet the legal threshold when it invoked the legislation, which it had never used before. Thousands of protesters angry with the government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, including vaccine requirements, descended on Ottawa in January of 2022 and blocked border points elsewhere. The protesters parked large vehicles on key arteries in the capital city for nearly a month and honked their horns incessantly for days. The government invoked the Emergencies Act on February 14th, 2022. Happy Valentine's Day. It gave law enforcement extraordinary powers to remove and arrest protesters and gave the government the power to freeze the finances of those connected to the protests. The temporary emergency powers also gave authorities the ability to commandeer tow trucks to remove protesters' vehicles from the streets of the capital. The Emergencies Act says that a public order emergency can be declared only in response to an emergency that arises from threats to the security of Canada that are so serious as to be a national emergency. The Act defers to the Canadian Security Intelligence Service's definition of threats, which includes serious violence against persons or property, espionage, foreign interference, or an intent to overthrow the government by violence. The government cited the situation in the Alberta border towns of Coutts when it invoked the Act. In the early hours of February 14th, before the act was invoked, Mounties in Tues seized a cache of weapons, body armor, and ammunition. 4 men are now awaiting trial, accused of conspiring to murder our CMP officers. Mosley said the situation created by the protests did not meet the CSIS threshold, and the invocation of the Emergencies Act does not bear the hallmarks of reasonableness, justification, transparency, and intelligibility. The potential for serious violence, or being unable to say that there was no potential for serious violence, was, of course, a valid reason for concern, he wrote. But in my view, it did not satisfy the test required to invoke the act, particularly as there was no evidence of a similar hardened cell elsewhere in the country. Only speculation, and the situation at Tues has been resolved without violence. Mosley's decision also examined one of the most controversial steps taken by the government in the response to the protests, the freezing of participants' bank accounts. He said the economic orders infringed on protesters' freedom of expression, as they were overbroad in their application to persons who wished to protest but were not engaged in activities likely to lead to a breach of the peace. He also concluded the economic orders violated protesters' charter rights by permitting unreasonable search and seizure of the financial information of designated persons and the freezing of their bank and credit card accounts. The 2 men whose bank accounts were frozen also argued that their rights under the Canadian Bill of Rights were violated, but Mosley disagreed. The government has long argued that the measures it took under the Emergencies Act were targeted, proportional, and temporary. This was an extremely tense time. The safety of individual Canadians was under real threat. Our national security was under real threat. Our national security, including our economic security, Freeland said Tuesday. A mandatory inquiry led by the Commissioner Paul Rouleau reviewed the government's use of the Emergencies Act in the fall of 2022. The inquiry heard from dozens of witnesses and reviewed thousands of never-before-seen documents, including cabinet ministers' text messages. Early last year, Rouleau concluded that the federal government met the very high threshold needed to invoke the Emergencies Act, citing a failure in policing and federalism. Lawful protest descended into lawlessness, culminating in a national emergency, he wrote. Justice Minister Arif Varini said the government cited Rousseau's conclusion when discussing the government's decision to appeal Mosley's ruling. Rouleau's decision stands at odds with the decision that was rendered today, and I think that is important. And it also informs our decision to appeal, Varani told reporters Tuesday. CSIS Director David Vignol testified that he supports invoking the Emergencies Act, even if he didn't believe the self-styled Freedom Convoy met his agency's definition of a threat to national security. In his final report, Rouleau argued that the definition of threats to the security of Canada in the CSIS Act should be removed from the Emergencies Act. Rouleau, an Ontario Court of Appeal justice, said he reached his conclusion with some reluctance. I do not come to this conclusion easily, as I do not consider the factual basis for it to be overwhelming, he said in statements he gave after his report was made public. Reasonable and informed people could reach a different conclusion than the one I have arrived at. So on it goes. My position stands as it is, which is that we should not allow a government to simply round up protesters, freeze their bank accounts, put them on trial on trumped-up charges, because essentially what you're doing is criminalizing protest. And even if it is a protest that you didn't like, right? That's the whole point, right? That's the whole point. And XD, I tend to agree with your question, with your point, right? They'll come to a decision when Gaza has been completely cleared of Palestinians. Yeah. It's very much how, like, the Ukrainian war is going to end, right? That's kind of how I think about these things. That when the Ukrainian war comes to an end, they will just announce it on, like, page 52, paragraph 24. They'll give it a headline like Ukrainian conflict steadily comes to its conclusion, right? They'll use the softest language possible. It'll just be buried, and it won't even like be bold print. It'll be just like tucked into the bottom of a financial press kind of thing, and no, there'll be no There'll be no articles written, no opinion polls written or anything. There'll be nobody in any news organization anywhere that comments on it. It'll literally just be like, "Yep, it finished. Oh yeah, it just finished. Well, as it does. Well, right, and it'll be the same. It'll be the same thing with this, that the International Court of Justice will render its decision, and the Western world will publish it, and page 52, the Article B, subsection 52, paragraph 12, right? Oh yes, and the ICJ ruled against Israel. Yeah, okay. Well, moving on, and that'll be considered reporting. That'll be considered serious and genuine reporting. Leaving it to us to pick it up and be like, oh hey, by the way, right? Remember that genocide that happened 4 years ago? Right? Remember how the United States discredited itself in front of the entire world as a credible institution? Well, the ICJ agrees or disagrees. Content writes, John, why do you keep calling it a protest one doesn't like? Where do we draw a line between a protest we don't like and a real and serious problem? Well, like, I don't know that I understand the question. Like, where do we draw the line? I would argue we draw the line when it's actually doing something violent, right? Like if they're like walking up and down the street shooting people, like there we go. If they're actually doing like real acts of violence, and like protests are supposed to be muddy. They're supposed to be difficult. That's the whole point, right? Or else it's not really a protest, is it? Right? And I mean, I guess it's a fair question to ask. Like, when does a protest become like a riot? Like, when does a protest become like something that's actually a serious act of violence? And I would argue that when they start doing acts of violence, right? That like parking trucks in inconvenient places and making a lot of noise, it's not like that's a protest. Like that's not an act of violence. And I've been saying this entire time that it's not exactly as though the Trudeau administration was trying to talk to these guys. Like that to me is the most shameful part of the entire thing, right? Like so much focus gets put on the truckers. So much focus gets on, well, the truckers did this, the truckers did that, and the truckers are doing this, and the truckers did this, and then the truckers did that, and then the truckers did this, and truckers. What did the Trudeau administration do this entire time? I don't know why I'm supposed to pay more attention to the truckers than I am to the literal fucking government, right? I don't know why my criticism is supposed to be for this group of yahoos and not the literal fucking elected government that has control of a military, right? Like the Trudeau administration, day one, called these guys Nazis, right? Called them far-right fringe element. You talk about divisiveness in the discourse. And at no point did anybody actually even attempt to talk to these guys, right? So, like, what's the point of electing these people? What's the point of having leaders if when things get real, they just go hide under their bed and cry about it, right? Like I feel like the major indictment for the Trudeau administration is just how weak they looked through this whole period of time. Imagine a bunch of truckers rolling up on your doorstep and you getting intimidated by it as the fucking leader of the country. Like, he just went and cried, right? He cried about it. He didn't even send people to talk to them at all. Didn't actually do any governance. And when they actually started to protest in a manner that was actually costing his owners money, he invoked the Emergencies Act and had the RCMP clear them, and then went after their bank accounts. Like, what a prissy little bitch. What a just prince. What a ponce, right? Like, can you imagine what would have actually happened if when these truckers rolled up, they just like sent a delegation down to talk to them, right? Like, that there's your big gotcha. There's your big, like, hey, we're actually going to show whether or not this is a protest or whether or not this is just like a bunch of violent ne'er-do-wells, right? Let's actually send a delegation down there and actually talk to these guys and actually be like, hey, what's the problem? What can we do? Right? Because you're the, elected government. That's your whole fucking job. It's like your whole fucking job. Your whole entire job as elected representatives is specifically to deal with these kinds of issues when they arise. That's the reason you're elected. That's the reason you're an official. Right? And they just didn't. That the only point of contact our elected officials ever had with the convoy protest was the RCMP. That's embarrassing. That's absolutely fucking embarrassing. Like, just to take a bunch of guys who are citizens, like the fact that they even showed up to protest is like this giant, enormous failure. Do you have any idea how easy it would have been to get these guys to go away? Like, what was their big complaint? Vaccine mandate means that I can't work. Right? That was their whole complaint. It's like there's like 2,000 of these guys, maybe. Right? Oh, well, like we're not gonna worry about that for you guys. Like, you guys live in isolated trucks. Like, you're not a threat. They're not. Like, they're not a threat. So who gives a fuck? Right? You guys are gonna come down here. You're gonna cause a bunch of problems for us. Right? They didn't even try to do the basic thing that you expect from the political class, which is invite the leaders up into the building and bribe them. Right? They didn't even do that. Like, they didn't do fucking anything. Like, this is the thing that I really want to drive into liberals' brains. Your leader sucks. He sucks at politics. He is terrible at it. Right? The most basic fucking shit. The most basic fucking strategies. Invite the leadership up and bribe them and tell them, tell your people that we've got a deal coming up and they'll go away. Right? And then you'll get some kind of cushy position over here, or we'll give you whatever you want in order to make this happen. Right? Like, that's basic politicking 101. Like, that's straight up. Like, bribe the leadership. Like, what are you doing? Nothing. Like, just fucking terrible. Just embarrassing as shit. And to me, like, what, you think them invoking the Emergencies Act in the face of these yahoos, right? That's what they're doing for these truckers over the most simple, mundane shit. When it actually gets serious, when it's actually something real, when it's actually something big, when it's literally like hundreds of thousands of people saying like, hey, where's our food and shelter? Like, what, are they going to evoke the Emergencies Act? Are they going to get the RCMP to clear these people out? They're going to seize people's bank accounts? Right? So I just am like I am yet to be shown one shred of evidence that shows me that these guys were anything but a bunch of just fucking yahoos. Just a disorganized rabble who managed to get together on message boards and we're like, yeah, you know what? Fuck this government. Fuck Trudeau. Let's go down there and honk. Right? Because they'd all been fucking laid off at the same time. They'd all been shown the door at the same time for the same reason. Right? And they all just got together and drove on down. Honk. Right? Enormous national security threat. Huge, enormous national security threat. Right? The massive security threat of a bunch of truckers disgruntled showing up to blast their horns because they lost their jobs. Like, and our government doing fucking nothing. Like, literally fucking nothing about it. Except to call them fucking Nazis. Which is rich, considering who Trudeau is. Blackface wearing, literally inviting Nazis into his parliament. His deputy prime minister is the granddaughter of a Nazi collaborator. All right, that's real rich coming from Trudeau. So, like, Who did these guys kill? Is there even a report of one of them shooting one weapon one time anywhere? Is there you got this one report of like, well, we found some weapons and found some stuff. It's like, so you got a group of yahoos doing some dumb shit. Okay. Like that doesn't indicate like a large scale organized terrorist cell or something, right? Like it's just like dumb. It's just fucking dumb. The whole thing is dumb. It's a Ponzi dumb prince dealing with a bunch of dumb rabble, and he doesn't know what he's doing, and it's really obvious. And for some reason, this like blackface prime minister is allowed to be the leader of the fucking country. It's I don't know. We're just getting what we deserve. Like we're just getting what we deserve with this. Like I feel like the whole protest could have been resolved in less than a week. Like like literally just walk down there and be like, what is this about? And they would have been like, we don't want to take vaccines and we want to go back to work. Like that's what's so fucking mind blowing about the whole thing. They wanted to work, right? Please let us subserviate ourselves to the system of capital, right? We just don't want to put this fucking thing in our veins. We just don't think it's right that the government mandates that we take this vaccine, that we put this thing in our veins. We don't really know what it is. We don't know where it came from, right? We don't trust the company that makes it. And we think it's kind of weird that you're mandating it so that we can sit by ourselves in the cab of a truck driving across the country alone. It's like the fact that these guys lost their jobs over this is what makes it unreasonable, right? That's the unreasonable thing. Like, who's fucking losing a trucking job over this shit? And it's like, and the idea that the Trudeau administration couldn't have just resolved this very swiftly just tells you that they're not interested in resolving problems. They're not interested in helping people. They're interested in helping themselves. That's all they're interested in. And the whole thing's blowing up in their face, right? The whole thing's backfiring in big, massive ways. There are huge sections. Like, there is definitely a section of those groups of people that might call themselves centrists, right, who exist between conservative and liberal, and that swing between these two poles, that are looking at this being like, oh yeah, fuck Trudeau. Let's get the fuck away from this guy. Like, and Trudeau is just tanking in the polls, man. Like, Trudeau is tanking in the polls, right? COVID didn't go far enough. I mean, it's just a shot across the bow, right? Another way to ask the question is, when does a protest gain legitimacy? When does it become legitimate to riot? I mean, when does it become legitimate to revolt? Right? When is it legitimate to have like a true revolution? That's a question that I actually think about all the time. And then I want to, what I should actually start doing is I should start sending like pressers around to other YouTube places, because it's not like the mainstream's never going to actually have this conversation. But I do want to have like a serious conversation with people who are well entrenched in the system and ask them this question very plainly. When is it acceptable to revolt? When is revolution a moral imperative? Right? And I'd love to ask people like Sam Cedar that question. I'd love to ask people like Jimmy Dore that question. I'd ask fucking Hinkle that question, right? I'd ask any of these guys. I'd ask Russell Brand. I'd ask anybody this question just to hear what they have to say, right? Like, when does it become a moral imperative to revolt, right? And like, I would say that making it so that people do not have access to food and shelter is a moment when you have crossed the threshold. You have said, we are creating no way for a person to gain access to food and shelter. Right? There are no jobs. There's no systems that actually support people any longer, right? Like, that's when you're setting yourself up for a true revolutionary force. And you think about what these truckers experienced, that they went from having jobs to no longer being employable very swiftly all at once, right? Like, it's hard to deny the revolutionary spirit that they would have all experienced simultaneously. That sense of betrayal, that sense of abandonment, right? Like, again, you can dislike these guys all you like, right? Like, that's fine. No, you don't need to we don't need to like each other. We just need to acknowledge that we're all citizens, and that's the point. That these people have rights, and they deserve to be able to support their families. They deserve to be able to have food. They deserve to be able to have shelter. They deserve to be able to do well in the world, right? And if the government is going to pass a piece of legislation that makes that not happen, well, then there's going to be a response to that. I feel very passionately about this convoy issue because like I grew up around these people, right? Like they're just fucking normal rural people. Like they're not this I knew that this whole thing was in real trouble when Trudeau stood up and started to say these guys were Nazis. I was like, no, they're not. Like, sure, I bet you could find a Nazi. Like, I'm sure of it. But like, these trucker types are not fucking Nazis. Like, they're not this far right fringe kooky like organized terrorist organization, right? They're more or less just dudes who want to be left alone. Like, really. And so when Trudeau stood up and said the shit that he said about these guys, I was just like, oh shit, if that's what he's saying about these guys, imagine what he's going to say to us. Imagine what's going to happen when actual real social protest begins to happen in big and serious ways, which incidentally I suspect is going to happen under Poilievre. Because I think that a lot of the people that are swinging towards Poilievre are going to realize very quickly that he's betrayed them. Because that's what he's there to do. He's there to betray these people. They're not just isolated in a truck cabin, though. It's getting tiring that we want to believe they're principled, not just some deep-fried contrarians to a sissy man. No, I just think they lost their jobs. Like, that's it. Like, I don't think it's an ideology. I don't think it's any of this, right? In fact, if you read their documents, you can see pretty clearly they haven't really thought through an ideology at all, right? Like, their statements are like, we want more business. Okay, cool, right? That's not a well thought through kind of thing. They lost their jobs. That's it. Like, these guys are literally like the South Park guys going, they took our jobs. It's literally what they are. Like, I don't know why we're layering a bunch of shit on top of them. I don't know why. They don't have an ideology. They don't have like a big statement. They just are citizens who lost their jobs because they refused to take a jab they didn't trust. They refused to take a vaccine they didn't trust. That's it. That's it. Like, and I don't think it's irrational. Maybe next pandemic we can make the next vaccine optional and charge for it. I mean, I live in Canada. We didn't charge for the vaccine. Like, we didn't charge for the vaccine. I just think that it's like well blown out of proportion. This idea that this group of people would have somehow been a vector. No. Probably not. Right? So it's just like extremely blown out of proportion. And I think that I think that people lost their jobs over it. They lost their livelihood over it while they were like investing a lot of their own time and their money. Right? Right? They lost a lot of their own time and a lot of their own money. Many of these guys own these trucks, right? So they're like petite bourgeoisie, if you like. But like the truth is that they just lost their livelihood because of the government. And that's it. That's it. That's as far as they went, because that's all that really mattered to them. Right? Because that's what it was all about. Just they lost their jobs because they would refuse to take a vaccine. And I feel like the whole thing was just and still is blown well out of proportion. Like, if these truckers if a small handful of truckers didn't take the vaccine, it's not going to create a Holocaust. Like, come the fuck on. Like, who gives a shit? Right? Like, for real. Like, who gives a fucking shit? I can't imagine giving a shit about it. Like, it's just this, it's a percentage of a percentage of a percentage of a niche group of a percentage. It's like this tiniest fractional group. And yet this group is able to like make national headlines, get the Emergencies Act evoked, just have like this enormous clusterfuck around it. When the Trudeau administration could have fucking walked in there and just been like, "What's the story here? Oh, you guys lost your jobs. Well, don't worry about it. Off you go. Get out of here." And the whole thing would have just been like, because like, who gives a fuck? I gotta tell you, Mikhail, I love the lockdowns. I did. I'm pro lockdown. And you know why I'm pro lockdown? Because I'm kind of a hermit. I like it. I find interacting with like people on the regular to be kind of like, not, it used to be more tedious than it is, but it definitely is. Like, there's a bandwidth. There's a bandwidth. And I just like, I don't like to exist in that bandwidth most of the time. Then you got another section of people argue that they don't have to take the jab to keep their jobs. I mean, like, that's sort of assumptive. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't think the amount of people who would not have taken the vaccine is going to be like accumulate in the way that it is discussed. Like, I just don't think that that's actually a serious point. Like, really, like all of a sudden everybody's just going to go, oh, well, then I'm not going to take it. Well, no, like your doctors and your nurses are still saying take this thing. There's still like reasonable voices in the discourse. Most people did take the vaccine. Like, they didn't need to be mandated to take it, right? I find the whole concept of government mandating the vaccine to be a bit odd in the first place, right? Like, if like, but what I mean is like, it's not going to create this fireball. Like, it's just not. It's not like these vaccines prove to be like bulletproof. It's not like these vaccines prove to just be like, you take the vaccine and you're immune to damage, right? It's straight up not what happened. Like, it's wise to take the vaccine. Some protection is better than no protection, obviously, but it's just like, I just don't believe that more people would not have got the vaccine if it hadn't have been mandated. Like, it just seems to me like the people who didn't want to take the vaccine didn't, right? And we all lived. Like, I mean, we're here, right? Like, where's the Holocaust? And like, I don't think we should be willing to give away our right to protest over it. No, I understand that COVID was a dangerous thing that killed people, right? Absolutely. But it's not as though the vaccine was literally like, this eliminates COVID, right? Like, for a period of time they tried to say that to us, but it's not true, right? And like, I just think it's completely reasonable that somebody would be like, oh, big massive mega corporation suddenly has a vial full of something that the government is telling me I must put in my body. No. I think that's perfectly reasonable. Like, I just do. Like, I think that if a person wants to think to themselves, okay, I'll face COVID without this thing, then that's the way it's going to be. Right? And like, it raises a lot of questions about the lack of trust that exists in the society. Why are people so mistrustful? What why do people not want to go into this? Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, right? You might still, so what people hear is they hear you might still die from getting the shot. Okay, cool. Then I won't do it. I'll take my chances. Like, that's the bottom line for a lot of these guys. Oh, like, if it's I might die to some virus that comes through, sweeps through, right, causes people problems, and I see that people are in fact dying, right? Like, there they are. We know it, right? And it could come through. Or putting faith in these organizations that I do not trust. I have 0% trust in these organizations, right? Probably less than 0% trust. then I'm just going to take my chances. I'm gonna put my hands in. I'm going to let Jesus take the wheel. Then they're just going to do that, right? They're just going to do that. Like, and I feel like this conversation gets kind of oddly complicated when it's not that complicated. Like, I just think that there's a small group of people who said, I don't trust the government. I don't trust massive multi-conglomerate corporations. I trust Jesus. I'm going to let Jesus take the wheel. And like, I think it's that pretty much that straightforward. And it just blew up into this enormous, crazy fireball that now we're looking at, and I'm looking at, as a legitimate threat to our ability to have open protest in this country, when it simply should not be the case. And it's the reason why I'm spending as much time on it as I am. I consider this case to be the biggest threat to our civil liberties in Canada today. This is the government attempting to create precedent to be able to say, if you protest, we can do this to you. That is what these liberals are trying to do. And anytime anybody stands up and says, no, you can't, you're not doing that. Like, I hope the people whose bank accounts they froze, I hope they get $1 million each. I hope that the precedent is that if the government uses this in order to stymie protest, then the government will pay. That's what I hope the precedent becomes. Because I am seeing in the future that protest is not just going to be important, but absolutely deadly necessary. We are absolutely going to need to be able to do that. And so any attempt to encroach on that at all on anyone, I have a lot of trouble with. I got a lot of trouble with. Have a good one, Cotton. I know that this one's personal for you, bud. I do. I know this one's personal for you. But, like, we should not sell our rights away. Like, that's the bottom line. No, that's all. Has a New Bookshelf writes, hey, here protesters for ceasefire and pro-Gaza natives were forcibly photographed, frisks, enclosed in special pens to get inside of protest areas. At no protest before has such abusive behavior in former episodes of protests in Romania. Like, yeah, Arab heritage protesters were harassed, pestered by police, stalked without a warrant. Yeah, like, the West is going to try to take away your right to protest. It's going to make it scary. It's going to do a lot of different things in order to make it more and more difficult to achieve and more difficult to do. And we really, really shouldn't let them. Like, we really, really shouldn't let them. And I mean, there's very simple and obvious reasons why it's happening. What the hell is this shit? Get out of here. Oh my god. This article just became ridiculous. Hold on, let's see if I do a refresh on it. Nope. It's such a shame because the article, majority of Canadians are now spending more than they take in. StatScan says the wealth gap is widening. Like, people are not going to be able to afford basic necessities. Like, people are not going to be able to people are not going to be able to take in basic goods. Like, it's going to get very serious and it's going to happen very dramatically. and the response to it from the public needs to be mass protest. There's no alternative. Yeah, Vesland, I've tried that kind of stuff, and they usually just create more problems for me than they solve. So I don't bother. You notice how Biden looks more and more like the Mask character? Yeah, I mean, it does seem to be like this is a real like I came from a Christian fundamentalist background, and so whenever like the leaders of like end times kind of stuff is are presented, they always had this kind of like sinister competency. You know, it was always just this like sinister, like we have a plan and our plan is evil and dark and it's against you people and we're gonna go after you and there was this like, but even though you understood that they were like evil and like dark characters, there was still like an aura of competency about them, right? I don't think anybody really saw coming this dementia ridden like delusional bullshit that it was going to come down to just two complete uh uh just demented old men. Like who could have ever seen this coming? Like oh man. And like while it's all happening, there's this rising sentiment that somehow the left wing and the right wing are on par with one another, even though their goals are like sharply different in big and serious ways. Like when did the concept of people having access to food and shelter become an extremist perspective? When did it become extreme that uh, uh, when did it become extreme to say everyone should have access to food and shelter? Like, is it just always been kind of assumed? Has it always just been built into our society that it's normal and natural for to allow people to be homeless and die in the streets? Is it just like a normal, natural thing that we just permit to occur in the society? Right? Because it seems like that's the case. It seems like it's just always been understood that people should not have access to food and shelter. And you think people should have access to food and shelter? What are you, a far left commie? Well, I mean, yes. But it just is odd. And it just, the more I think about it, the stranger it gets. Like, everyone should have access to food and shelter. Why don't they? Why isn't it just built into the Constitution? Why is there not a line in every single constitution? Why isn't there a line in the Canadian Constitution, the European Constitution, the British Constitution, the French Constitution? Food and shelter is guaranteed. Like, why does that not exist? And the reason why it doesn't exist is because these documents are written by slavers, by people who understand, oh, well, if we guarantee food and shelter, then we can't withhold these things from people in exchange for their labor. Right? We can't force people into homelessness. We can't point at the homeless to scare the shit out of the poor. We can't say, well, you better work for us or you'll sleep on the streets. Right? Like, we should change our constitutions and add amendments to our constitutions and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that makes explicit that food and shelter is a guarantee. These are things that you just get. And if a bunch of landlords are going to cry about it, well, let them cry. Just let them cry. Like, I don't understand why we're supposed to kowtow to this small group of parasites whose major success seems to just be being born rich. It's just very odd to me.
And it's like, I don't want to be a therapist.
Yeah. Oh, wait. Oh, wait. And like TVO today, hundreds of Toronto tenants have been on rent strike since mid 2023, and more could be coming. Yeah, stop raising rents. Like it would be so easy. Just stop raising rents, right? Like the rents going up has nothing to do with anything. It's literally just landlords raising rents because they can. That's it. Just number goes up, and that's all. And people have to buy, because where else are they going to go, right? Like where else are they going to go when you have like national corporations and national organizations just jacking prices? And landlords are a parasite class, and so they just look and they say, oh, this guy can charge a $2,000 for a one bedroom, so I'll just charge a $2,000 for one bedroom, right? They don't give a fuck about things like market forces or any of this kind of shit. They don't care what's actually going on. All they know is more money, me good. That's all they know. Ontario started 2024 with hundreds of tenants on rent strike in the province's biggest city. The most recent spate of rent strikes began in Toronto last May, and in the months since grew to encompass hundreds of tenants in at least 7 buildings across the city. Attempted rent hikes are a central issue in all the strikes. While tenants are seeking to negotiate this and other issues collectively with their respective landlords, the landlords have all maintained that tenant cases must be approached individually. Yeah, of course, because, that's what bullies want. A bully wants to be able to bully people individually. They don't want people to group up. The result so far has been a stalemate as groups of tenants continue to withhold rent, running the risk of eviction, while their landlords continue to push for individual evictions through the landlord and tenant board. In a way, rent strikes are very similar to labor strikes, says Ricardo Tanjan, a political economist with the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives and the author of 2023's The Tenant Class. Basically, Tanjan says individual tenants have very little power to negotiate with their landlords on issues like rent increases and maintenance, just as individual workers have little power to negotiate their wages. Landlords own the homes in which tenants reside, much like employers own a business, and have access to financial assets that tenants generally do not. The difference is that tenants do not have collective bargaining rights, he said. Tenants do have the right to form associations, but those associations aren't recognized as formal representatives of the tenants in legal proceedings. A landlord doesn't have to sit down with a tenant union or association and bargain collectively. Rent strikes are a way of trying to gain the landlord's attention and force that outcome, Tanjan said. Like, straight up, tenants don't really have power in this situation, right? Tenants are forced into a position where they have to negotiate or organizationally. A fellow by the name of Penguin Demance on Twitch. Do you believe neocon Nimrata stands a chance against Trump? No. No, I think that Trump is like a force. Like, I think Trump is something bigger than just a guy running. I think that he has galvanized the public and galvanized people, and his base is so strong that, like, I just don't. I just think that uh, 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 I just think that the people who want to see Trump win are not interested in other perspectives at the moment. I think that there's like many people view Donald Trump as a rebellion against the system. This is the method by which that they are throwing a hand grenade into the quote unquote establishment. Right? They fail to recognize that Donald Trump was part of that establishment because they view the establishment as the government, when the establishment is actually like the system of capital itself. And Donald Trump is part of the system of capital, right? He's not a Washington insider, certainly, but he's the person who the Washington insiders would listen to, right? So but I think that there's just too much. Being from Canada, do you personally support Trudeau? No. I think Trudeau has actually been like really, really bad for Canada. Like, I mean, I think that the system of capital has been really bad for Canada, but like Trudeau isn't really to me the thing that we can really peg Trudeau with is that he got in the way of a lot. Like he pretended like he was interested in solutions, and he's not really interested in solutions. Like he's kind of weak, right? He's just kind of weak, just kind of a weak leader. Yeah, what's happening in Vancouver? What's happening across Canada? Right? Like what we are experiencing, there's very little that Trudeau could have done to prevent this, right? Outside of like actually standing up and actually talking about it and actually fighting back, right? Good to see you, Swam Clowns. Good to see you. This live is surrogate ASF. I don't know what that means. The power should be removed from the state. Yeah. Oh, somebody asked earlier, do I think we should vote third party? Yeah. Do whatever you think is right in regards to voting. Just don't vote for Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, or NDP. Just vote for literally anybody else. Like, throw your vote away. But what's happening in Canada is the same thing that's happening in America. It's a system of extraction and abandonment. That's the system. That's the way it works. That the system of capital will only keep you employed insofar as it needs you, and then it'll just grind you up and throw you away, right? Which is exactly what it's doing. You can see that in the housing crisis. You can see that in the fentanyl crisis. You can see that in the prison crisis. You can see it in every aspect of American and Canadian life. Like the goal of the political class is to enable capitalists to grind us up for money and then discard us. That's the whole point. And Polyev is going to be the same, right? Like he's talking a good game, but he just is going to totally betray everybody, right? Like cuz he works for the system of capital fundamentally. He's just a very effective grifter. On Twitch, the Despotian. I used to chat with very pro-socialist Canadian. It was comical as a Southern American libertarian with nationalist leanings. Southern American libertarian with nationalist leanings. That's a long way to say that you're probably a fascist, my man. Like American libertarian with nationalist leanings. Okay, bud. And your response, I wish I was. It would make my life easier. It'd be more straightforward, right? You wouldn't have the mental gymnastics, right? You could stop pretending on a lot of different issues. That'd be good. Like libertarianism is such a funny kind of ideology because it is like fundamentally like everyone should just do what they want, right? Uh, uh, and it just doesn't work out. You like I don't really go for ideologies that can be disproven by playing a single game of Monopoly. Pierre just wants to stabilize interest rates. I mean, he's not going to though, right? Like this is the thing about Pierre Poilievre. He's just not going to do any of this stuff, right? Like he might throw a crumb here and there, right? Like he might do like little tiny things and like make a big deal about it. I think that's going to be what you're going to see. You're going to see these sort of small giveaways to certain groups as like a type of piecemeal reformism, little tiny acknowledgments and head bobs and things like this that we're all going to be told to accept, uh, 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 and that we're not going to that we're not going to uh, and like they're just going to try to normalize a lot of this stuff. Yeah, this is just where the prices are now. This is just where housing is now, right? This is the new normal. And so when it goes down 2 percentage points, they could be like, look, it went down from the new normal, right? And at the end of the day, Pierre Poilievre is not going to do anything. So he works for the system of capital. He exists to enrich a small group of wealth holders. The problem in capitalism and communal control of resources is the pretense and incompetence in the systems. The amount of devotion to and purity of system just doesn't exist, unfortunately. I would argue that the trouble with the system of capital is the antagonistic relationships that exist within it structurally, right? It isn't like I don't like the look of that guy's face. It's that there's an ownership class and a working class that are at odds with one another, right? That antagonistic relationship means that you can never have a adequate control of resources or any kind of stuff, like competent or not, like that there is no such thing. Like if you have a in a capitalist system, if you have a competent ruling class, well, that competent ruling class exists for the benefit of the capitalist system because it's a dictatorship of capital, right? And so they will competently ensure that their side, the capitalists, win at the expense of the working class because it's an antagonistic system. It's a system that has an antagonism built within it. And there's no method by which you can find recourse from that. That's the system. That's how it's structured, right? So that to me is why the systems of capital don't work, because Lincoln said it best, right? Lincoln said it best. A house divided against itself cannot stand. Well, if you have the majority of workers pitted against the capital owners, and they're constantly at odds with one another, where they're constantly needing to have strikes and have negotiations and big labor kind of thing, well, you're just wasting everybody's time, aren't you? You're just having big, gigantic labor disputes, and like, how is this at all efficient? How is there any efficiency built in this? Where you have groups of people who need to constantly be fighting back against groups of other people because their interests are not aligned and cannot be aligned, right? What's good for the workers is bad for the capital holders, and what's good for the capital holders is bad for the workers. And that's just the truth. That they might say, like, a rising tide raises all boats, but it's bullshit. It's like total fucking nonsense, right? And so that's why systems of capital fail. They fail because they can't align the populace together and have everybody kind of heading in the same direction. And instead of things just being about conversation and about discussion and about coming to compromises and terms with one another, everything is a fight. Everything is a fight every single time. People have to go on big, massive strikes for like a 1% increase in their pay, right? Like it's nasty. I think property rights is definitely obscured. People shouldn't own what they aren't doing anything with. Basically, an interpretation of squatters' rights. It's unnatural, aka beyond natural laws. I mean, what you're sort of describing, or what it sounds like you're kind of describing, is like, yeah, why does a person who has never stepped foot inside of a business own shares in that business? Look, the workers should own the means of production. The people doing the work are the people who should be the primary beneficiaries of that work, right? And that's very simple. It's a very straightforward idea, right? That if you and a group of guys are working in a machine shop, right? You got a couple of guys doing the administration in the front. You got a couple of guys working the machine heads. You guys are running a machine shop. Well, why is it that some guy who couldn't find the machine shop on a map, let alone has ever been inside the machine shop, is the person who has decision-making power? Well, let alone the one who gets to take away your surplus value, right? Like you're getting paid this measly wage while you're making like $300,000 a day for these guys, right? Like it's such a fucked up system. This idea that people who do not know where to find these companies or what these companies even do are the ones who have decision-making power. And of course, the only edict they ever send you is make more money for me, right? They don't give a shit about your community. They don't give a shit if you're poisoning anything. They don't give a shit about worker safety. They don't care about any of this shit. The only edict they're ever going to tell anybody is make me more money. And if that means that you've got to reduce wages, if that means that you need to lay off 10% of the workforce, if that means that you just need to skirt around environmental legislation or labor safety legislation, then they will. And if the people who have the jobs in order to enforce that won't, then they'll fire those people and they'll put people in place who will, right? Like, the system doesn't work, and it doesn't work for very clear reasons. And it's that the people who are the ones who are making the decisions and the people who are the ones that get the lion's share of wealth are not actually involved in the process and don't live in the places that they live in. And so the solution is to get the workers to be the owners. Have the workers own the means of production. Yeah. Reminds me of people who get a job because of business degrees and only know of flowcharts when entering a job. Yeah, and for some reason these guys are the boss. Right? And it's very straightforward in my perspective. The reason why you end up with these business degree guys being your boss when they don't know the first thing about what's going on is because they're trained to do one thing very, very well. And that's say, yes, sir. That's it. It's the only thing that they do, is they say, yes, sir. So that when the investor class, the shareholder class, the owners, the bourgeoisie, show up and say, hey, we need you to lay off 10% of the workforce, they'll say, yes, sir. Right? Like, that's what they want. That's what the whole system of education is for. Like, when you listen to your Jordan Petersons talking about competency, the people who ascend the hierarchy are the people who display the most competence. It's the most competent people who are at the top of the hierarchy, which means I'm the most competent. My argument is not me just patting myself on the back. Ha 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 ha. Well, what are you competent at? What's this competency? Competency in what? Well, it turns out that the competency is in saying yes, sir. That when you're given a task, no matter what that task is, you just say yes, sir. Right? That's what the competency is. That's the only competency you need. Like, you don't even need to be particularly good at it. Right? Of course they would like somebody who's good at doing it, but at the end of the day, you just need to say yes, sir, and just do it. Right? Just follow through on the edict. And the edict is make me more money. Lay those people off. Pour that oil in the river. Like, yes, sir. That's what they're training people for. You got an entire system of yes men. Right? And those yes men answer to the system of capital. They answer to the ownership class. They don't answer to you. They're not interested in your well-being. They're not interested in raising your wages or your quality of life. That's not what they're trained to do. So you have like entire institutions, an entire generation of people who are trained to just say yes, sir. Who went through an education system that gave them grades based on that premise. Right? We all went to grade school. We all went to high school. What was the only thing that you had to do to get through those schools? You just had to do what you were told. That's all. You didn't even need to do it very well. You just needed to do it. Right? And if you stood up and said, well, this is dumb, I'm not interested, well then F, you don't get to continue, no diploma, no future, right? You don't get to go anywhere because you refuse to do what you're told. So the system reinforces this idea and in fact rewards this idea that says, do what you're told. And so what happens? You just end up with a bunch of people graduating from high school, having done what they were told. And if you did what you were told really well, you got scholarships. And then you go off to a university, go off to a college, continue doing what you're told. And what is it that you're told to do? Well, learn this business course, learn how to run a McDonald's, learn how to run a Walmart. Here's some flowcharts, here's some basic principles, all this kind of stuff. And then when you get into the position, do what you're told. Like, that's the whole structure of the whole system. And what you end up with is a managerial class that has been well disciplined and well trained by the system of capital in order to do what they're told, so that the capitalists don't need to do it themselves. Like this, like this is my major critique of this system, is that there is nobody, literally nobody, in any system anywhere within the system of capital who has solutions. Because all of these guys, for decades now, for entire generations now, have just been trained to say yes, sir, and defer to capitalists. And now the capitalists are literally filling up bags of gold, throwing them over their hands and their backs and going, yeah, everything's fine, and then running off to Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island and just abandoning us. And that's what's actually happening. Fiat currencies and the dynamics of supply and demand, two very bad influences on society. It creates an artificial sense of scarcity by limiting currency in circulation. There are investment techniques to be continually accumulating said fiat currency. Yeah, I mean, the manipulation of the currency. I articulate this a little bit differently. I say that what we have started to do is worship. We worship money. That's what we do, right? Like we're not thinking about money as it's meant to be thought of, right? Money exists. If money has any justification in the society at all, it's to facilitate complex trade. That's it. That everybody just has, instead of everybody existing even on a system of credit or everybody existing in a system of barter or something like this, you have this currency, money, that everybody just exchanges with one another to facilitate complex trade, right? But what happens with money systems is they're easily corruptible, and there's a lot of instability. They don't exist. That if the goal becomes the accumulation of money, then you can do that by basically just having a lot of money. That money creates money, and that's a very corrupted way of viewing like what money is for. Like that's not facilitating complex trades for the benefit of the society. That's just taking money and making money with it, right? Which is why for thousands of years, money across medieval Europe was literally like controlled by the crown. They would pull all the money in, do a recount of it, make sure there's no counterfeiting, and then redistribute it back into the society. Because they understood that the purpose of money was to just make sure everybody had access to goods, right? That it wasn't so that money and wealth could accumulate for its own sake. And what we have done is we've begun to worship money, right? Why do communists think that taking the power from the bourgeois and concentrating it into the state will solve something? Because it does. Did every single time it's been tried. Capitalism is not about creating money. It's about maintaining pre-existing wealth. Yeah. I mean, I see where you're coming from. Like, it's... but I do think what's happened in our society is that we have replaced the logical... we've replaced the logical, we've replaced the purpose of money with a kind of obsession and a worship of money itself. That's my point. Where has communism worked? I mean, the Soviets took an agrarian society that was literally ruled by kings into a world superpower in a single generation, defeated the Nazis, the largest capitalist army that had ever been fielded at the time, first people into space. Like, I don't know what you need, bud. Perpetually increasing of wealth exists as an interest and loans model. It isn't treated as real, aka production to create goods. Yeah, I mean, the capitalist, and if you read the financial press, if you literally read the financial press, They don't they talk about something called the real economy, right? Because most of the American economy is this fake bullshit nonsense financialization, right? Like this financialization of the economy, which is basically just managing money and pretending as though the managing of money is important, and that somehow this is worth spending all our time and effort on. That shuffling currencies and doing currency exchanges or betting on a stock market or any of this kind of stuff is somehow productive, right? And so you end up with all of these like Wall Street losers. You end up with all these bankers, all these financiers, these investment groups, all this kind of stuff, and they're doing nothing. They're not actually making anything or creating anything, right? They exist to withhold capital with the statement that says, "Well, you better make me money," instead of just using that capital to actually do something that would actually benefit somebody, right? But that's not the purpose of capitalism. The purpose of capitalism is not to benefit anybody with anything. That's just a side effect. That if you manage to do something that actually benefits somebody, that's just a side effect, because the actual goal is to make money. The actual goal is to make wealth for yourself and for no other reason. That you doing something nice for somebody, or you feeding somebody or clothing something or providing a service for something is a side effect. And many of these like Wall Street guys have figured this out. That the goal is not to do something that helps. The goal is to just game the system as much as possible to make as much money for yourself as possible. And they do it all the time. The richest Canadian today is some guy who literally just like did a bunch of scams in crypto and got caught doing a money laundering scheme, and so he fled the country. Richest Canadian, like that's productive. All of that is useful, right? Making your money trading on crypto and then doing a bunch of money laundering. Yeah, that's useful for the society for sure, for sure. We kind of replace entrepreneurialism with capitalism. I don't think communism are anti and entrepreneurialism, but maybe I'm wrong. Like, look, if you want to, like, the whole point of communism is that the workers should own the means of production. That's the whole point. Like, if you want to go out and make a widget and do the work and do all that kind of stuff, the communist perspective is, yeah, yeah, great, fantastic, right? Off you go then, right? Like, if you're and that you should be able to be the primary beneficiary of your own labor, right? It's the capitalist system that says you have to subserviate yourself to this class of citizen, this ownership class, who withholds capital from you and becomes a quote unquote investor, and pays you a wage and withholds anything that you need to actually get access to unless you can convince them otherwise. And the only way you can convince them otherwise is money. Money me good. Like, that's it. That's the only way that you can ever convince them of anything. So it doesn't matter if what you're doing is actually really beneficial. It doesn't matter if what you're doing is good for the society. It doesn't matter. Right? Like, can you imagine trying to pitch something like a library to a modern day capitalist? It would just never fly. Right? The modern day capitalist ethos views a library as like, a library. What's the point of that? Everybody should own a book, right? Or they, you know what? They can put in every individual, if they want to rent a book from me, then they can pay a little rental fee, and then they can get access to that, and then they can return it back if they want. But everybody will just buy their own book, right? Why should we bother with libraries, right? So they just like uh, 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 things that are just for the common good exist outside the mind of a capitalist. It just doesn't exist. Printing a currency creates an incentive to do something to get the money, but then creates inflation and trickles into negatively reinforced participation for everybody else. Like, I mean, I think that most people are doing what they're doing because they need food and shelter. I think that's most of what drives people in a capitalist system. That people would like to be productive in other ways outside of the system of capital, right? And we can see the enormous amount of volunteer work that happens in the society as proof of that. But like, I think most people do what they do in the society because they don't have access to food and shelter, and we seem to be too polite or uncomfortable pointing that out. That most people are doing what they're doing because they need food. I think if I want to work and make enough money to make a Ferrari, a communist would be like, good for you. Yeah, fantastic. I don't see why anybody should give a fuck about that. The issue is not that you have wealth. The issue is that other people are homeless. Like, that's the issue. Why does homelessness exist in a capitalist system? And homelessness exists in homelessness exists in uh, uh, capitalist societies as a result of capitalism. That it benefits the capitalists to have a section of the society be homeless. I'll go. Let me ask you something. Great. Imagine if there was only one communist country, okay, and no one to embargo it. Oh, okay. As if Cuba was the only country in the world. Who would they blame their crisis on? I mean, I feel like they wouldn't have the crisis that they are currently having, right? Like you take the capitalist boot off of their back, and you're going to see that they're going to flourish. Marxism never said communist country needed capitalist country to exist. It's a system you build on your own and deconstruct capitalism. I mean, that's not what Marxist said. That's not what Marxism stands for, or what Marx said, right? And there's like, you trade with your neighbors. Like, I know, I don't really understand this point that says, oh, a communist nation traded with a capitalist nation, therefore it's capitalism that's good. What are you talking about? Right? People trade with one another. And Cuba has done phenomenally well for itself, considering the boot that it's had on its back. And there's actually something very serious that's about to happen for Cuba. That there's a organization. It's not really an organization, but there is a trade grouping that's happening in the world right now that has been called BRICS. It's between Brazil, Russia, India, Russia, China, and South Africa. And there's a whole bunch of other groups, a whole bunch of other countries that have joined it. And this is like a loose trade affiliation that's happening. Basically, these countries are saying to one another, we should trade outside of the American system. We should trade with each other independently, and we should no longer involve the Americans in our trade. And that's actually happening. And Cuba is getting involved in that. So what that means is that a lot of Cuba's productivity has, like, when you go to Cuba, like I've been to Cuba, they've got a whole bunch of facilities that are not running. They've got a lot of plantations that they're not using. They've got a lot of rum distilleries and a lot of cigar makers and a lot of this kind of like luxury goods and things like this, which is what they have a lot of, that aren't running. And the reason why they're not running is because they don't have access to the market, right? So they would just be making this stuff for nothing. So they make enough to supply the amount of demand that they can, right? Little bit of Canadian market, little bit of the European market, but like that's kind of it. Because of the embargo that exists through the Americans. Well, now their market is about to open up to China, right? Now their market is going to open up to India, right? So all of a sudden Cuba has done very, very well for itself already. Did you know that Cuba has more doctors than Canada? Not per capita. Than Canada. Like that's an enormous success. That they're able to provide free healthcare for their citizens. They're able to provide free education for their citizens. They have more doctors than Canada does, right? While experiencing these embargoes, while experiencing these harsh sanctions that have been stepped on their back. Like, you want to talk about successful communist nations, right? And so the second that they are able to you know what's really holding Cuba back in big and major ways? They don't have access to tools. That because they're not allowed onto the international trading market, because they've got destroyers sitting outside their ports and their borders, they don't have access to basic tools. They don't have power tools, right? All of their technology is still in 1960. When they get access to the Chinese market, all of that is going to change for them. That the moment that these Cubans get access to tools, the moment that these Cubans get access to like markets, and they're able to exchange their luxury goods, which they can make a ton of for those goods, Cuba is just going to grow and grow and grow. It's going to happen so fast. The desire for the Cuban people to improve their country is enormous, right? That they're constantly looking for ways to do it within the limitations that exist. And they're a perfect example of an extremely successful communist country, right? That like Cuba is maintaining a communist country off the coast of Florida, right underneath the jackboot of American imperialism, and you think they're doing badly? That's a very weird position to hold, frankly. It's a very strange position to hold, in my view. In North Korea, since they ignore the market, yeah, ignore the market, sure. The government will allocate people to certain fields, even if it's against their will, source required, because you need people to work. There isn't just a market to control this. So they just force people there. Again, like, source required. Like, I suspect you don't really know anything about North Korea, dude. Like, that's the truth. Like, if you get all your news from like propagandists and like people who go on Joe Rogan, like in North Korea, when you take the train, they actually make you push the train. That kind of dumb shit. Yeah, BRICS is the largest GDP energy producing bloc. Yeah. Oh yeah, the dollar is in a huge amount of trouble. There is an enormous uh, 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 there's an enormous decline coming for the American dollar. Oh wait, am I a DPRK bro? No, I just don't believe everything I read. Like I don't uncritically believe what the CIA has to say, and I remember the history. I remember the Korean War, right? So I'm not like a DPRK bro. Like I think that there are things to criticize, but you need to criticize countries within the realm of reality and not in this weird realm of propaganda where things exist in a vacuum, right? Like the Korean War was a serious event that destroyed Korea in a big and a massive way, and it's sort of a miracle there's any standing structures in Korea, in North Korea, right? Like the north of Korea was leveled to the ground. No standing structures, 20% of its population killed. Like, how do you recover? Well, they did. Yeah, but like that's for everything. You have two sources. You have America that wants to paint them as good as they can, and the DPR wants to paint itself the best it can. I mean, my position is very simple when it comes to sources, right? All sources are good insofar as the information that they're providing, as long as you understand the bias of the source, right? As long as you understand the bias of the source, then you can basically use any source you like, as long as the information that's within the source is good, right? Like just because the National Post says something doesn't mean it's true, right? But if the National Post says, according to this institution, and you see that that institution is like Harvard, right? Or you see that it's an institution that actually, like NASA, that's actually credible, that doesn't have a big long history of lying or releasing a lot of fraudulent reports, like the CIA, for example, then you could kind of go along with it, right? But a lot of the times, the shit that you see about North Korea, the source is straight up the CIA. It's just straight up like oh, this came from Radio Free Asia. Like, did you know that in North Korea you're only allowed 13 haircuts? What? Fuck off with that. It's so stupid, right? Oh, dude, please do not defend the CIA in this chat. Do not attempt to defend the CIA, because if you are uncritically believing what the CIA has to say, then you are the dupiest of the dupes. Like doopy doopy doop doop doop, my man. Like I'm gonna let you know that. I'm gonna let you know that right now. That the CIA exists. We literally have former CIA director Mike Pompeo saying out loud in front of people as a quote, the Central Intelligence Agency will know that its directive is complete when everything the American population believes is false. That the goal of the CIA, the purpose of the existence of the CIA is to lie to the American people and to convince the American people that what is happening in the world is not happening, and to create false narratives and to create false information. That's that's the stated agenda of the Central Intelligence Agency. So if you read what the CIA or any of its surrogates or any of its connections are saying and you go, that's the truth, then you're a dupe. Straight up. Because they have said to your face that their goal is to lie to you. So I reject the CIA out of hand. I don't consider them a source. Like even to support my own positions, I don't use the CIA because the CIA has stated to us very with clarity that it exists to lie. And when you find out that a person is lying, when you find out that a person is being duplicitous and lying, you have to get rid of them. Like literally stop paying attention to them. And the only reason to pay attention to them, especially given the power of the CIA and how large an organization it actually is, the only reason to pay attention to them is to say, what are the lying liars saying? Let's listen to what the lying liars are saying and listen to them lie so that we can hear their lie. And when they say their lie, we'll very swiftly be able to find out what the truth actually is. Because lying liars can't stop. They can't help themselves. So they lie. And I would say that it's actually true that, like, I'd say 95% of the time, whenever I listen to what the State Department or the Pentagon or the generals or the CIA has to say, I literally invert the worldview. And I'd say 95% of the time that's been successful. That there's a genocide happening to the Uyghurs. And I just go, probably not. And then I do some cursory investigation. I'm like, yeah, that's right. There isn't a genocide happening to the Uyghurs in China, right? And they've even dropped it. They don't even talk about it anymore. Because it's like so obviously false. Like nobody takes that shit seriously. Especially as they commit a massive genocide in Gaza. So you could just invert it and you're just like, oh yeah. So the inverse is actually what the truth is. This stuff that sounds like bullshit takes a lot of time to be declassified and proven it was. Yeah, so just skip the steps. Just skip the steps. Don't listen to the CIA. Don't believe the CIA. Don't pay attention to the CIA. If you find out that a journalist has connections to the CIA, they're dead. They're gone. Right? Like just no longer pay any attention. Like this is the piece of advice that I have for anybody out there who's trying to decipher between what is fake and what is real. Right? Once somebody lies to you, right? And when they're confronted with the lie, they reaffirm the lie and they continue lying, they're done. You don't need to listen to them anymore. Like, that should be well understood, but it seems like it's not at all. And I think that like confirmation bias plays a big part of it. That like someone like, I'll take like a completely uncontroversial person, Rachel Maddow. Nobody should listen to a word Rachel Maddow has to say. She's a fraudulent liar in massive, enormous, large-scale ways. The whole Russiagate bullshit that she was spreading around for fucking years, and it all came out that it was bullshit. Nobody should listen to a thing that woman has to say. She's a fraudulent, overwhelming liar. And yet people do. People still think that she's a credible voice. It's like any time anybody from the Bush administration stands up and has something to say. Oh, let's listen to what Condoleezza Rice has to say. Yeah, let's listen to what George W. Bush has to say. Did you know George W. Bush has a master class? What's point one? Just lie your face off? Just being a fucking fraudulent liar? Right? So just stop listening to these people. And stop believing what they have to say uncritically. That when an organization like the CIA talks, your first instinct should be probably not. And then when you look into it, it should be with this element of like, yeah, these guys are liars. Like, and you should understand that. Yep, streamers using Tucker and Pierce for lazy content. Yeah, I mean, there is an argument to be made. There is an argument to be made that these people do need to be responded to. Right? And I think that there are streamers out there that are doing a fine enough job at it that I don't feel like I should do that. right? Like I'm not interested in that because they're so full of shit, right? Like if a person who's not being if a person who is being disingenuous is talking, then you could just kind of ignore them. And like I don't see it as my role to constantly try to debunk liars. I'm trying to find out what is true. I don't need to spend any time deciphering what liars have to say. Like, you understand? Like that's my perspective on all of this. I don't want to turn my show into like a debunking show because yeah, like okay, like go watch Jimmy Dore, go watch Hassan Piker, right? They do that fine, right? That's what they want to do. They want their business model to be set up on just debunking these people and rolling their eyes and be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe what boomer brain," right? Well, I'm going to be over here trying to figure out what is actually true and discussing what's actually true and spreading in as best as I can out into the world what the truth actually is. I don't need to spend a lot of time on Tucker Carlson, right? I don't need to spend a lot of time on Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson or any of these guys. I don't need to spend a lot of time debunking them publicly because they're so obviously frauds. Who cares what they say, right? It's sort of the only thing that's interesting about them is that there are large groups of suckers who still listen to these guys, right? When they're obviously frauds. Like for God's sakes, like a guy like Ben Shapiro outright says that he thinks that his Bible comes before evidence. It's like, okay, cool. That doesn't make you credible or interesting. It just makes you kind of a kooky loon. Hassan doesn't debunk anyone. Sure, he does. Yeah, he has lots of segments that are like, let's take a look at what he especially his favorite target is Bill Maher, right? He loves Bill Maher segments. So, and that's not to shit on Hassan. Like Hassan does fine work, but my only criticism of a guy like Hassan is that I think he's more interested in a business than a movement, and I think that's true of all of these guys. Am I pro-abortion? I think anybody can do anything they want with their body. That's the long and short of it. I think Jimmy Dore was sharing an article from the health section of the Epic Times on Rumble the other day. Embarrassing. Come on, Jimmy. Don't uncritically spread around Falun Gong shit. Don't critically spread around Falun Gong shit. Christopher De Silva, hi John, do you follow the Amazing Atheist? No. I have to be straight with you, Christopher. I find that the religious conversation that exists in the country to be very tedious because most of it revolves around religion as fundamentalism. And if you start to have a conversation that exists outside the fundamentalist worldview, uh, then nobody knows what you're talking about, right? Or at least the people who are making their careers off of it don't want to continue the conversation, or can't continue the conversation, right? Because like the atheist crowd just goes, oh, it's just a bunch of hoobu jubu nonsense, whatever, and they just walk away from it because they're not really interested in engaging in it outside of the fundamentalist worldview because it's easy to dunk on fundamentalists, right? It's easy to just be like giant spaghetti monster dunk, right? And you don't really actually have to think about non-fundamentalist theism, right? As long as it exists within the confines uh, um, of fundamentalism, then atheists are just happy to dunk on that all day. And you can hear that with all the new atheists. You can hear that with all these guys. Oh, your book that says magic is real isn't real. It's the easiest thing to do, right? And as long as there's a market for that, then these guys are all just going to stand up and do that. Uh, uh, and theists and conversely, theists don't really want to engage with me either because when I talk about theism and when I talk about my perspective, my religious perspective, because they're fundamentalists, they hate what I have to say and they don't want to listen, and they can't really engage with it either because I reject many of their premises. Right? Like I don't think that the events that occurred in your magic book are real. right? Like I think that there is a form of truth in the way that the arts contain truth, right? But it's not like literally Jesus Christ literally rose a literal guy from the literal dead, literally, right? Like I'm like, really? Probably not. Probably not. Probably has to do with building like a cultural icon, right? That story probably has more to do with like connecting Christ to like other gods that exist within the discourse of the day, like Ra and Dionysus and all these guys, right? Probably has less to do with Jesus Christ being a literal necromancer, right? So the religious crowd loses me too, and like it just feels like I don't really follow anybody because they're all like this. They're all in this kind of like fundamentalist worldview that I just completely reject. I just reject fundamentalism. I just reject this idea that like my book contains the total truth of all creation. Like probably not, bro. Probably not. Like it's some interesting stories, some cool stuff. If you actually read the words of Christ, maybe you'd be a better person, right? Like a lot of these modern day Christians, I'm just like, you guys hate Christ. All of these Christians, man, they just fucking hate Christ. That they love the image that they've made of Christ, but they despise who he is. Like just if you read the Sermon on the Mount, you're just like, oh yeah, modern day Christians would literally crucify this guy. They hate him, right? Like, and to me, that's the biggest indictment that exists of modern Christianity is how much they despise their own leader. So I don't really follow like the Amazing Atheist or this guy or that guy because every time I do, I just find myself going more fundamentalist nonsense. It's easy to be an atheist when you're talking to fundamentalists. Yeah, Dora also did some Uyghur genocide debunking, as I recall. Yeah, Dora is such a like a mixed bag, right? He used to be better. He used to be better when he was smaller, but now his audience got full of like right wing people, and he really grabbed hold of like left right alliances and things like this, and so now things things are getting kookier. His stuff is getting kookier. His sources are getting looser. Like sourcing the Epic Times is pretty bad. Like that's pretty bad, right? Like you can, like I say, you can use anybody as a source, right? But there are some sources that are obviously fraudulent and like should be questioned pretty thoroughly, and the Epic Times is definitely one of them. For those of you who don't know, the Epic Times is owned by a cult by the name of Falun Gong that started in the 90s. It has swastikas in its talisman. It's a racial purity cult. It was thrown out of China for being a racial purity cult with swastikas on its emblems. And it exists here in Canada and the United States. And and it runs a paper called the Epic Times, and it has like a cultural thing, Shen Yun, China before communism, which is like as embarrassing as it gets. Yeah, I studied a lot of political from the 1600s in England and Europe. It was all conducted in theological terms. Yeah, there's like a language to it for sure. Jesus was a cool philosopher. Unfortunately, got stoned to death. Uh, Jesus Christ was not stoned to death. That is not the way that Christ went out. I haven't seen anything to show me that Epic Times is CIA funded, but if it ended up being the case, I wouldn't be blown away by that at all. Yeah, he was crucified, my man. Yeah, that's. I'm glad that you came to that one by yourself. I got to tell you, I'm glad that that happened. Good, good. I'm neither pro Chinese nor pro Western, unfortunately slash fortunately. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like at this stage in the game that puts you ahead of everybody. Right? You don't need to pick a side. Like you don't. And I tend to be a bit more positive of China because my view of China is I'm following the success of the Communist Party in China. And so I like to discuss China from that perspective of the successes that it's having. And it is obviously having successes. Like, that's for sure the truth. John F. McDropout. Christ let his spirit go while on the cross, but he was back to work on Monday. That's right. So everything's fine. Christopher De Silva. How do you feel about automation? Should we embrace it? Yeah, the trouble for me is not automation, right? That I actually think that automation is a great idea. The issue is the distribution of the outcome, right? It's the distribution of wealth. It's how the positives of automation is distributed. That's the problem, right? It's the system of capital. Like, automation should be a really great thing for the entire society. We should all look at it and be like, oh, all of these tasks that we were hitherto tied to, uh, uh, like, I'll take a look at the industrialization and the automation of farming, right? That farming uh, uh, used to require 70% of the population. That's what it used to require. 70% of the population was what was required to be involved in food production, right? Well, through the process of automation, that's now 2 to 3%. So way less labor is required. Way less labor is required because we automated it, right? Big gigantic combines and huge treadmills and massive containers and now there's like aerial logistics, and you have automated combines now where people can control combines from a single service sector. Like, you got guys sitting in trucks looking at 10 screens, making sure the combines are all doing what they're supposed to be doing, sending out drones to be able to go places. Like, it's like automated, right? And so what benefit did that have to the public? Well, it gave us access to food. Like, so the food supply became more guaranteed. But instead of giving us luxury time, right? Uh, uh, it ended up basically expanding the service sector, right? So for a brief moment, everybody was like, go to school. Yeah, school's the thing to do. Everybody just go to school. But they saddled us all with a bunch of debt, right? It's not like they made school free. So they saddled everybody with a bunch of debt, and then they just funneled us into systems of capital. And so everybody ends up in the service industry. So everybody's just a servicing capital, right? That's literally what we're doing now. And so instead of the population actually having free time and actually having luxury and having the luxury of having some free time, right? Everybody's got to suck these capitalists' cock. It's just as lame as it possibly gets. And it's turned us into a real lame society. And the same thing is going to happen here. When this automation comes through, it's going to lay off a whole bunch of other people. And where are those people going to go? They're going to go to the service industry, right? Because it's like the last stop. It's like the last place. Maybe if we sell the capitalists cream puffs, maybe if we sell them little baggies of popcorn, maybe if we sell them like little treats, maybe if we sell them in an escape room, maybe if we sell them some kind of amenity or some kind of good. It's like the last stop from the bottom, right? Uh, uh, and so if we actually looked at the at automation and said this system of automation should actually benefit the populace, it shouldn't just benefit 5 billionaires. That it should actually be of a benefit to the populace, and everybody should benefit from it in the society. I think it would be a wonderful thing. But because we basically suck five guys' cocks constantly, and every decision that gets made has to go through this like weird like Shark Tank of like, does Elon Musk thinks it's okay? It just makes us a shitty culture and a shitty group of people who make shitty decisions constantly. Uh, uh, and so you're just going to end up with an expanded poverty. You're going to end up with expanded homelessness. You're going to end up with an expanded service sector. Uh, 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 and you're just going to end up with five guys getting $1 trillion more for doing nothing. Because they just happened to be the people who owned the piece of paper that said, I owned the robots. Okay. Fuck the people who made the robots. Fuck the people who installed the robots. Fuck the people who maintained the robots. Fuck the people whose jobs got replaced by those robots. Fuck the society which within robotics came out of. Fuck everybody, right? It's just the whole point of the economy is so five guys can do really well, like beyond really well, like so that five guys can have more money and wealth than literal ancient pharaohs, so that we can what, like do what exactly? So this lame society is just absolutely knob gobbling these guys while abandoning their own children into desperation and destitute. Like we could do a lot better. We should do a lot better. Production was limited by real needs and factors tech has overcome with technical scientific development. Worker control of automation will come along with worker control of the means of production. That's exactly right. Yeah, the control of the production and the economy is controlled by an elite now. Yeah, and it's obvious that this elite is like desperately stupid and desperately detached from reality, right? Like it's like even if the people who had the massive amount of wealth were intelligent, right? It still is a bottleneck that really limits what the populace is actually capable of doing. Because all decisions have to go through these bottlenecks. And these bottlenecks are self-interested losers, right? They don't really have imagination. They're not really interested in building a sustainable future for anyone. Their idea of what good ideas are the same ideas that little boys think are good ideas, right? Like we're gonna put production into space. That's what we'll do. We'll put all of the production into space, and then all the pollution will go into space, and that'll solve global warming. Like neat. You'll literally destroy the planet doing it, but okay. I think both right wingers and leftists can come together under the idea that the elite are the enemy. I mean, you would think so. Like you would. You'd think that that could happen. I'm yet to actually see that manifest in a serious way. That the right is really hung up on the government. That the right is really like, and you can see that from the rising libertarian movement, right? You can see that kind of coming up where it's like the right is really hung up on the idea that it's the government that's the problem, which completely ignores that the government, the elected people in the government work on behalf of capital. They work on behalf of the wealthy, right? That they don't work for the benefit of themselves exclusively, although many of them do operate on the idea that they are going to enrich themselves through the system. But they enrich themselves by allying themselves to capital, to the capitalists, right? And so the idea that exists within the right is we got to get rid of the government, right? The government is the problem. And that to me is just a method to that actually just sells the society directly to the wealth of the nation, to the wealthy, right? Get rid of the government. Okay, well, who has power in the society then, right? Still the billionaire. Only the power is direct now. Now the billionaire can just go around and do whatever he likes, right? And you're just sort of subserviated to that billionaire with literally no electoral system to theoretically put his power into check, even though it doesn't at the moment. And so, to me, that's like such a huge, massive problem, right? Like that, it would be great if the right wing could actually look at Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, David Thompson, right? And actually go like, no, these guys are obviously the problem, right? But like at some point, like to do that, they kind of have to look at communism and actually go, yeah, this is correct. That there is an ownership class and there's a working class, and the dynamic between the two is no longer acceptable, right? But the right just seems happy to... Right. So we've got a libertarian, right? Deregulating and opening up competition would help the problem. Nope. Absolutely 0%, such a non-starter. This is more or less what I'm talking about. Fundamentally, what you're saying is deregulating, i.e., letting the billionaires do anything they like. So letting the rich do anything they like, right? Opening up competition. What are you talking about? Opening up competition. What are you talking about? How can anybody compete with a guy that has $200 billion? Like, what are you talking about? Like, it's so like it's so ideological in its worldview. It's so just like, how could that possibly function, right? People fill in roles, they meet needs, sure, but who do those people work for, right? Like, I just think that you don't respect how much $200 billion is. I just don't think you respect how much $1 billion actually is, and what it actually means, and what it is you're actually saying, right? Like, you think that just some guy in his garage is going to make a better model and suddenly compete? Like, it's just not going to happen, right? Like, the billionaire will either buy them out or just bury them, which happens all the time. Like, if you have $1 billion like, here's something that Walmart does. Here's a tactic that Walmart already does. That they will move into an area with their superstores and they will undercut all competition uh, 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 by lowering their prices way lower than their competitors. Which means they run at a loss. But because they have hundreds of billions of dollars, they can afford to run at a loss for a long time. And what does this do? Well, it destroys the competition because their deregulated capital came in and undercut their competitor because they had billions of dollars to do so. And then once the competitors were decimated, they doubled their prices because now they've got a monopoly. And if anybody popped up and tried to start to undercut the Walmart would destroy them. Like, I don't take this position seriously at all because it has no basis in any observable reality. Like, you cannot compete with someone who has $100 billion. You're just not going to make an online bookstore that can compete with Amazon. It just doesn't exist. Logistics can be expensive. Mass control can get expensive. That leaves an opportunity for someone to undercut by offering a cheaper product. Maybe that product isn't as good, but as long as it meets a need and somebody is willing to pay for it, bazinga. So if magic is real, like, look, man, I'm gonna lay this out for you. You think magic is real, right? You think that some guy in, like, Nebraska is gonna make a product and compete in the world without subserviating himself to the system of capital, without being bought out by the system of capital. It's just not real. But you can have a bookstore and so can others. Okay, dude. Like, so you can have your rinky-dinky little bookshop. Like, that's not really competing. Like, it's just so obviously false. Like, it's just so obviously false. Like, your grandma opening up, like, a little rinky-dinky bookshop out of her garage, right, is not competing with fucking Amazon. It's just not. Like, it's you think magic is no wonder you're a libertarian, right? Just more magical thinking from these libertarians who think that their grandma's bookstore in her basement is the same thing as fucking a multi-billion-dollar organization like Amazon. Like, eesh. A lot of people do like working, though. Yeah, we have to find meaningful labor and allow automation to do less fulfilling jobs. I mean, we have plenty of evidence to show that people want to work, right? We got plenty of evidence to show that people want to work, right? That the evidence that people want to work is, you could just take a look at the amount of hours people put into voluntary services in the United States, right? You take a look at how many volunteer hours people put into the United States, and you're like, okay, well, if money is the only thing that's motivating people, then why should they then why do they donate their time, right? What's with all the volunteer work? Most of the Republicans are the working class. The only way to take down capitalism is to rally the working class. No, it's true, right? But the trouble is that we have a lot of magical thinking in the conversation, right? People who think that opening up a bookstore in their garage with like $500 is the same thing as competing with Amazon, right? Like if you have this kind of magical thinking in the conversation, it makes it very difficult to move forward because like it's really clear that we are existing in a period of monopoly capital. Like it's really, really very obvious and straightforward. And saying we should have less rules for the monopolists and open up the market to competition with the monopolists, it's just not serious. It's just the most unserious shit that a person can think. Like it's not going to work. And if you began to build a business that even started to remotely become a regional threat to a place like Amazon or Walmart or any of these places, they would either A, buy you out, or B, just destroy you. Right? Like it's how it goes. It's how it actually works. And so the solution doesn't exist in just let people do whatever. Because it just basically means that you're subserviating yourself to the system of capital. That Jeff Bezos might as well become a king, right? Like, yeah, I'm sure that under like in monarchy that there were people who were like growing little plots of land secretively off in the corner, right? That didn't threaten the power of the crown. Do we all agree on the same thing? It's another thing. Like, I have a central point. Like this is what I think. And this is basically the only thing that I really, really am fighting for. Everyone should have food and shelter. Everyone should have food and shelter. Food and shelter should be uh, 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 built into the fabric of the society and should be delivered without question. No excuses. No, but won't people do? Like, none of that. Literally, oh, you're alive? You're a citizen of our country? Here's your food, here's your shelter. Have a nice day. John, won't that destroy the entire rental market? Yes, good. I hope that happens. I hope I'm alive to see every landlord cry about it. I hope that I live to see landlords cry about how they can no longer be parasites in the system. Right? So like, are we all pointed in the same direction? Do we all have the same goals? Because my goal is that everybody has food and shelter. And every time I end up talking to somebody on the right, it seems like their goal is to make sure that nobody has access to food and shelter unless they sell themselves into the system of capital through a system of wage slavery. See, here you go. I actually disagree about that. Everyone should be given food and shelter. Everyone should be given the opportunity to earn food and shelter. Earn it from who? Like, so you support wage slavery, right? Food and shelter should be withheld from the public in exchange for their labor, right? That's what you believe? So you're a proponent of wage slavery, right? During the Civil War, the American Civil War, Lincoln was elected on a platform of eliminating this system that we currently have, which he called wage slavery. The chattel slaves of the South, the chattel slavers of the South, actually argued that chattel slavery was a superior model because it was actually more moral than wage slavery. Because chattel slavers couldn't abandon their slaves when there was no work to be done, whereas the wage slaver could. Right? So your position that people should not have access to food and shelter, they should earn it from owners, is wage slavery. So you're saying, as a libertarian, you are pro wage slavery, right? So much for this idea that we're all looking for the same thing, because some of us are pro slavery, right? Like, what life, liberty, and happiness, or freedom, or any of that kind of stuff can be derived from a person? Can a person find when they're living in this state of wage slavery, where they don't have access to food, they don't have access to shelter, all they have access is the right to earn it? From who? The capitalist owners. Like, it's such a fucking joke. Yeah, classic libertarian. Slavery is inherent to nature. We can't be emancipated from natural needs besides death. Right? So slavery is just normal, right? Slavery is good. Well, so where's your line? Should we return to black chattel slavery? What type of slavery is abhorrent to you then, as a libertarian? Come on, stand up for the libertarian cause, defend slavery, as libertarians do. Everyone must work and do to sustain themselves as an inherent. So if we create an automated system that creates food, we should withhold that food and force people to work for it, right? We have a system of automation that creates food. Like, robots make the food. So we should withhold that food and make people work for it, right? No way it would be perfect. AI isn't that good. No, engage with the conversation seriously. We have created an automated system that generates food. Literally, you walk up to a machine and hold out your hand and it gives you a burger. It gives you any food you like. Literally, replicator technology. There it is. We have a million buildings. All of them are empty. Thousands of rooms. Anybody can live in them. But these things should be withheld, right? They should just be withheld in exchange for our labor, right? Okay, so what if it does? I mean, I disagree, but so what if it does? So what? So people should not have access to food and shelter, right? That's your position? People should not have access to food and shelter? If we could literally give them plates of burgers and fries and meat and whatever they like from nothing, we could literally pull it out of the air and hand it to them, but they shouldn't have that, right? Because they have to earn it? Is this the position? Robot service freely given, that's fine. Okay, cool. Great. So we've met a bar, right? There's a bar of rationality there. That if we can provide the food and provide the shelter, so why is it that we're all not just contributing to creating food and shelter at the barest possible minimum, right? In order to maintain that and then enjoying the fruits of those labors. And if we can get that down to so right now it's literally at 5%. Right? We haven't been able to get it down to 0, but it only really requires like 5 to 10% of the society to maintain the food and maintain the shelter. Right? It's something that we've got on lock, and we've got it on lock of because of automation. Right? So why, instead of everybody being involved in that to the degree that it needs to be involved in, and then just enjoying the rest of their lives, why do we subserviate ourselves to this system of capital where there's a small group of millionaires and billionaires who we have to sell our labor to? For what? No, see, this is a fundamental misunderstanding of what government actually is and what it does. You don't need a government for good actors. You need it because of bad actors. No, you need a government because you need to be able to talk to one another. That's the point. You need some system of organization so that you can get into a room with one another and be like, hey, what should we do? What how should we actually proceed? What hey, there's a concern. What should we do about the concern that we have? Like, cool, right? You could speak to your neighbor. So serious countries want something more serious than that, right? Like you're dealing like, what, do you live in a town of 2 people? Like, you're dealing with countries that have hundreds of millions of people. You're dealing with a very complex system that you're not just going to be like, yeah, let's just talk with my neighbor. Or, crazy thought, right? You should probably have some kind of organization that everybody can involve themselves in. Now, it's easy for Americans to want to reject the concept of government because the American government was erected by slavers and is corrupt, right? But the concept of government itself is not a corrupted idea, right? You're just living under a dictatorship of capital. You're just living in a system that doesn't actually respond to your needs. And so it's easy to say, yeah, we should get rid of government, right? It's easy to say, like, yeah, like this system's not working on our behalf. We're just getting taxed for nothing. We should get rid of the entire concept of government under those terms. But it's just literally selling yourself out to a billionaire class. That's literally what it is. You're looking at the billionaire class and saying, just own me directly. No more surrogates, no more in between, no more any of that kind of stuff. Just own me directly, Jeff Bezos. And and systems like government exist specifically in order to prevent that very thing from occurring, and giving the electorate and the voter base the opportunity to respond. The issue with what's gone on in America, is that the system was erected by wealthy slaveholders in the first place. So the system is designed in order to ensure the best possible outcomes for wealthy slaveholders, because that's what the system was designed to do. That's who the system was designed for. And the wealthy slaveholders created what communists would call a dictatorship of capital. That it's not possible to be involved in American politics unless you are very, very wealthy, right? I disagree. People can organize on their own. People with larger business and manufacturing can take care of particular problems. Yeah, you just want to sell yourself to business. Like, that's it, dude. Like, you've just said it. Like, you want to sell yourself to a business owner and let the business owner be the king. Right? Like, it's such an astounding thing talking to libertarians. Because during the course of this, like, you've defended slavery pretty openly. We found a bottom to it, which is that if food and shelter could be created completely freely, it should be given freely. Which is like, okay, cool. I mean, that's like the barest of bare minimums. That the goal of the society shouldn't be to discuss with one another about how to minimize labor to the degree that we maximize enjoyment, and to give people food and shelter. People should only be given the right to earn food and shelter. Who do they earn it from? Well, they earn it from the business owners that you want to sell yourself to. Right? Like, it's a type of serfdom that you're defending. Right? Like, do you not see that? Do you not see that? That fundamentally what it is you are arguing for is a type of serfdom? That we should just let the billionaire class own us directly? Which you've basically just said? Like, do you not see how that creates enormous, massive negative outcomes? It's already creating... Yeah, rent yourself to business owners, right? Wage slavery. Like, that's what's sort of astounding about this. Is that it's a defense of a form of slavery and serfdom, as if the ownership class, the billionaire class, cares about you. Like, that's what makes it so astounding. And you're just talking about it as if it's like totally normal. Yeah, I'll sell myself to owners who will be completely deregulated and there'll be no oversight body that exists. And I will sell myself to those owners and then I can trade for the goods for the money that I get from them. I can trade for things that I want. Like, what's to stop the owners from buying up everything and then jacking the price so that the wage you get doesn't actually buy the goods you want? Which is what they do, by the way. Like that's basic like company town shit. That's just straight up like the people would move to like Virginia mines and they would find that the wage that they received didn't pay for the food that they needed or the shelter that they had because those things were also owned by the billionaires. Like, which leads to, and what does that lead to? Right? That leads to massive, enormous labor strikes. Super productive. There's your productivity right there. Right? Super useful. Super awesome. Did you know that the first aerial bombardment ever done on American soil was done by a American corporation against striking workers? There's your productivity, right? Yeah, construction workers build homes they can't afford to live in. Thank you, Brandwin. People don't have to use their currency. If it is libertarian borderline idealism, currency isn't real function. They would have to own core resource sources. Like, who would have to own core resource sources? Like, who is owning these core resources, and how are you getting them? Like, you think that the billionaire class is just going to let you have that? Like, these guys are literally committing a genocide right now. Like, what are you talking about? Wool, iron, farms, etc., the hypothetical fiscal tyrants. What, you mean like Bill Gates, the number one farmer in America? Like, I don't really understand what your point is. Like, to achieve that, the billionaires would have to achieve something they've already achieved. Yeah. Like, again, I just don't think you actually understand how much wealth these people have. I just don't think you actually understand or respect how much wealth the capitalist class actually has and what they are actually capable of doing. That it's like easy to be a libertarian if you're dealing with like penny capitalism, right? And the richest guy is like the guy down the street that owns 2 cows, right? Like, we are talking about people who could buy entire countries. Like, for real, that is not an overstatement. Like, the amount of wealth that a guy like Bill Gates has is larger than many African nations. Like, if someone sold it to them, right? Like, they already have. Like, I don't see where your perspective exists at all, dude. Like, it just seems to me more and more that you're just getting deeper and deeper into this magical thinking. Like, the number one farmer in America today is Bill Gates. Like, where are they going to get access to these goods? From the farms they currently own. What are you talking about? Baked Potato, good to see you, my man. The issue is that the West never had a competent government that actually governs on behalf of the masses. So they accuse these incompetent politicians of not being worthy. Thus, they want to have zero government. I mean, it's sort of it's understandable in that kind of way. Like, if all you've ever known or experienced is the dictatorship of capital, then get rid of the government seems like a good idea, right? But the moment you recognize where actual power lies, which is in the capitalist class, and you actually start to take seriously an actual analysis of the capitalist class through Marxism, because that's exactly what Marx did, you begin to see pretty clearly that you do need to have some kind of government structure. You need, at least initially, right? You need to have a government structure to protect yourself from capitalists, right? That you can't just say no more government. Okay, so now you're owned directly by corporate power. You're owned directly by people who have hundreds of billions of dollars. You're owned directly by the largest farmers in the nation. You're owned directly by enormous property holders. And there's no system in place to stop that. So you're arguing in favor of a type of serfdom. The fiscal tyrants have the same humanity as government officials. Nope, definitely not. Money is just power. Corruption isn't magic. It's just cognitive bias. Okay, I don't really, again, I don't really know what your point there is. So it's okay to get rid of electoral politics and the system of electoralism, and the state, and have no checks or balances whatsoever on corporate power and the owners, because those guys are just as bad. Like, what's your point? So just to loop this around, like there's people in the chat who are saying we're all trying to do the same thing. No, we're not. Right? We just went through like a nice little 15-20 minute conversation here that showed pretty clearly that there are people who are pro-slavery, right? There are people who are fighting for serfdom. There are people whose idea of freedom is selling themselves to corporate power. Right? There are people who, when I say everyone should have food and shelter, their statement is not, that's right. It's, everyone should have the right to earn food and shelter. From who? Corporate owners I want to enslave us all to. Right? We just saw that happen. That was the conversation we just had. So bear witness to the collapse of America. Bear witness to America destroying itself. Bear witness to why it's occurring. Because when people stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, everybody should have access to food and shelter, and we should all participate in the labor of creating that food and maintaining that shelter to the degree that it is necessary, right? People stand up and say, no, what we should do is enslave ourselves to Bill Gates, sell our labor to him, and then buy the goods that he produces with the money that he gave us for our labor. America is finished. You cannot build a society on these principles. You cannot continue growing and moving into the future on the idea that the way to move forward into the future is to regress back into feudalism. It's not going to work. It's going to reduce the productivity of the nation significantly and seriously, simply based on the amount of conflict that such an arrangement is required. Bill will eventually die or his empire corrode, especially if squatters' rights was handled right. Who cares about squatters' rights, dude? What rights are you talking about? Your idea is to get rid of the institution that maintains your rights. Like, the amount of, like, libertarianism, man. Like, this has really confirmed in my mind that libertarians have not thought their shit through at all. Like, they have not thought their shit through at all. That the only point libertarians really have ever thought is, I should be able to do what I want. Well, tough shit. Right? Tough shit. You've got to actually negotiate with people around you. And if your plan is to get rid of the apparatus by which we negotiate that maintains our rights, well, then saying, I have squatters' rights, nobody gives a fuck about your squatters' rights. What do you think Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and these guys give two shits about your squatters' rights? They're going to give $100,000 to their goons, and their goons are going to come in and crack your head. And they're going to throw you out of the property. And you know what you're going to do? Nothing. Why? Because you dismantled the government. So you've got no recourse. You've got nobody to talk to. So Bill Gates and Bezos and all these guys can just have private military forces go through and fuck your shit up and take your stuff. And there's no government because they are the government now because you dismantled it. Like, libertarianism is just a brain dead man. Dude, is this brain dead? This is just straight up 0%, nothing going on there. I can't wait to sell myself to corporate power, and if I want to have squatters' rights, well, that doesn't exist. Like, what are you talking about? You shouldn't have to negotiate with people around. Too bad. Well, grow up. Fucking grow up. Yes, of course, you're going to negotiate with people around you. Everybody negotiates with everybody around them all the time, constantly, all the time. What are you talking about? Like, this is such a brain dead, dead end ideology. And like, Jesus fucking Christ, am I glad I had this conversation. Because like, boy howdy, does it ever show. Like, I hope that guy who's in the chat being like, no, we've got the same idea. No, we don't. That there are brain dead, backwards ass, dead in the water, 100% wants to. You understand? Not saying, well, I guess. Saying, boy howdy, I can't wait. I can't wait to get rid of the only apparatus that protects my rights to sell myself to corporate power. Fuck you. Like, fuck you. Fuck you. Get out of here. I'm good, man. No more pro-slavery bullshit in my chat. Get the fuck out of here. Jesus Christ, man. Just fucking little kid brain. Jesus fucking Christ, man. Libertarians, man. What a dead end. What a dead end. Like, holy shit. Complete smooth brain. Holy fuck. I can't wait to sell myself to corporate power. Nah, Inverted, you didn't upset me. Like, I'm glad that I had that conversation. Because, like, every so often I get into this mode of being like, you know, libertarians, you know, they do have a point and they have a perspective and all this kind of stuff. No, they fucking don't. Like, no, they fucking don't. These guys are trying to sell us into slavery. That if these are the guys that take power, their goal is to make sure that guys like Jeff Bezos are your new king. And they're happy about it. They're happy to dismantle the government. They're happy to get rid of any apparatus that actually is a check or a balance on Jeff Bezos. And they're too stupid to realize it. And at this point, that's a technical term. It's fucking stupid. What a stupid worldview. Like Jeff Bezos isn't just going to hire a bunch of goons and just come into your house and steal your shit. Like, what are you fucking talking about? And there's no government because you got rid of that. So Jeff Bezos takes over. Like, what do you fucking think is going to happen? Like, what do you fucking think is going to happen? It's so fucking dead brain. It's just so 0%. And so I hope that comes as a clear indication to you. Okay? I hope that's a clear indication to you. We are not fighting for the same stuff. That there are people in the conversation who are genuinely and openly fighting for your enslavement. That their entire objective, the reason why they're fighting, the reason why they're getting into the streets, the reason why they're pushing back is so that you can be a slave to corporate power. And they think that's good. You understand how stupid this is? So we are not on the same side. Jesus fucking Christ, man. Holy shit. That is some stupid, stupid shit right there. That is just some dead end, like, brain off. No, look, I think that libertarianism makes sense if you only know 5 people. Right? If you live out in the middle of the boondoggles, and the only time you have to interact with the government is when they come by with like a little form that says like, hey, we're raising taxes $2 so that we could put a stop sign somewhere. And you go, oh, my $2. Right? Like, and and you don't like filling out forms, and you find the whole thing to be tedious. And like, I'll just go talk to my neighbors. I only know 5 people anyway, and we'll all just agree with what to do with the small area that we inhabit. And we'll all just agree on that, and that'll be what we agree on. We don't need some other force that exists in order to maintain whatever rights we have. Like, no, I think, look, the word is not short-sighted, okay? The word is small-minded, okay? Because it is exactly that. It's the belief that everybody can just do what they want, and that'll be totally fine. Like, it doesn't get more small-minded than this. Like, you absolutely 100% need some kind of formal apparatus for people to come to air grievances that exists based on a series and a set of principles. What you would call rights. You 100% need an organization like this to exist. And if your idea is get rid of that system that maintains your rights and exists for us to air our formal grievances based on the principles that we all agree upon, if your idea is get rid of that, then you're essentially saying Jeff Bezos is your king. And if you cannot see that that is the case, then you are too stupid to be involved in the conversation. Unfortunately, this is a serious political position. Being a dumbass is a serious political position. Boy, I can't wait to sell myself to Jeff Bezos and show him how much I deserve food and shelter. Dumb fuckery, man. Just dumb. Every so often, man, I'm just like blown away with how dumb we are. Like, it's dumb. Like, I'm just blown away with how just ass backwards stupid we are. We deserve everything that's coming, man. Like, every single thing that's coming. These guys that are standing around being like, boy, I can't wait to be owned directly by Jeff Bezos. Boy, are they up. They're in for a fucking rude ass awakening. Like, what do you think is going to fucking happen? Like, Jeff Bezos takes over Texas, let's say. Elon Musk takes over Texas. We get rid of the Texas government, the Texas Constitution, the Texas court system. We get rid of all of that shit. That's all gone. No more government. Everybody just do anything you want. We'll just talk to our neighbors and everything will be fine. So Elon Musk takes over, gives $100,000 to a group of men, right? Their paycheck is $100,000. So he ends up with a posse of 100, 200, 300 men, right? And he just starts going into small towns and just destroying them, right? And some guy starts making a device that's going to compete with Jeff Bezos. And so he just fucking sends a crew in and they smash up his shit and steal it. Who are you going to go complain to? The government? Who gives a shit? Doesn't exist. It's so fucking stupid. It's such a stupid worldview that only like somebody that lives out in the middle of nowhere with no actual connection to anybody or a little kid could believe. Like, what are you talking about? And then the guy turns around and starts talking about squatters' rights. What are you talking about? Nobody gives a fuck about your rights. You destroyed the only institution that exists to maintain your rights. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, billionaires are always looking for a new lapdog to tell them where they are gods among men for accumulating money. Yeah. Look, it's just money worship at this point, right? That's what I was talking about earlier. It's just money worship. Oh, he has money, therefore he is a god. So we just listen to what he says, and what he says is good, naturally good, because he has money. Like, John, have you seen the most recent interview with Professional Michael Hudson and Pro Richard Wolff on Dialogue Works? I have, actually. Those two guys are getting thick as thieves, right? I actually feel like what they're doing, what Michael Hudson and Wolff are starting to do is they're starting to see how far they can push each other. That the two of them, Wolf even kind of commented on it in this last one, where he was like, just building on what Michael is saying and maybe pushing him a little further to the left even. And it just feels like the two of them are in this constant state of like, how much further can we actually go? How much how much further can we push this? Is there a line? When is too far too far? Right? Because as much as I like Richard Wolff and as much as I like Michael Hudson, they're not revolutionaries. Right? I think they both would like to be. Right? I think that in their heart of hearts, they're both sitting there being like, man, I wish I had like a collective group of people who we could have this revolutionary spirit and have this kind of thing. But they're not actually doing that because I think that they're both afraid that would actually kill them, literally kill them. And so, but I think they both want to be. I think they both want it. So they're constantly kind of pushing each other towards that. And becoming more bold. So they're worth watching for that reason alone. Even though, let's be real clear, it is kind of a circle jerk, right? When the two of them get together, it's like, yes, I agree with what Michael Hudson just said. Yes, Richard Wolff makes an excellent point. Just building on that. Yes, excellent addition, right? So it is kind of a circle jerk, but boy howdy, it's worth the watch. Yeah, baked potato. I think with the final statement of the final statement of the cast. The agenda of the 1% is to rule us, and if they can't do that, they will destroy the world. The world is not worth living in if they can't rule, is the conclusion Hudson comes to. Yep. It is better to rule in hell than serve in heaven. Always remember, guys, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.